Hello friends. Welcome to the Ben 10 What Ifs. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Ben 10 was born in the RWBY verse and got Harem of RWBY, Weiss and Gwen. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. The Boy with 10,000 Souls. The airship hummed beneath Ben Tennyson's face as he gazed through the viewport at Beacon Academy's soaring spires. Unlike the other new students crowding the windows with awestruck expressions, Ben's face remained composed, his green eyes calculating the distance from ship to shore. Cataloging escape routes, old habits from 7 years of wearing the universe's most dangerous weapon on his wrist. The Omnitrix pulsed against his skin, the familiar weight both comforting and concerning. The device had been acting strangely for weeks now, transformations ending prematurely or initiating without warning. Ben pulled his sleeve over the watch-like apparatus, concealing its distinctive black and green design from curious onlookers. Final approach to Beacon Academy. All first-year students prepare for disembarkation, announced a crisp female voice over the intercom. A holographic projection flickered to life at the center of the cabin, displaying a blonde woman with glasses and a stern expression. Welcome to Beacon. I am Professor Goodwitch. Today you begin your journey to become huntsmen and huntresses, protectors of our world against the darkness of Grimm. As she continued with orientation details, Ben tuned her out, focusing instead on controlling his breathing. The Omnitrix had been growing warm, never a good sign. He pressed his thumb against the faceplate, feeling the alien metal pulse in a pattern that almost seemed like a heartbeat. Not now, he whispered. Just a few more minutes. The device responded with a surge of emerald energy that raced up his arm like lightning, sending needles of pain through his nervous system. Ben clenched his jaw, forcing the transformation energy back through sheer willpower. 7 years of practice had taught him much about controlling the uncontrollable. As the airship docked with a gentle shudder, students began filing toward the exits. Ben waited, letting the excited crowd thin before making his move. Less witnesses if the Omnitrix decided to turn him into heat blast in the middle of orientation. The academy grounds sprawled before him as he descended the ramp, pristine walkways winding between manicured gardens, ornate lamp posts casting warm light despite the morning sun. Beacon existed in that architectural sweet spot between ancient fortress and futuristic compound, honoring tradition while embracing innovation. Not unlike the Omnitrix itself, Ben thought. He adjusted the green jacket that had become something of a personal trademark, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward into his new life, every movement precise and controlled, a warrior's gait disguised as casual confidence. Look out! The warning came a split second before impact. Ben's reflexes triggered automatically, a sidestep, pivot, and stabilizing hand reaching out to catch the blur of red and black that careened toward him. His fingers closed around fabric and he redistributed momentum, transforming what would have been a painful collision into a controlled spin that left both parties standing. Silver eyes blinked up at him, wide with surprise and embarrassment. The girl couldn't be more than 15, with short black hair tipped with red and a combat skirt that matched. The dramatic cape billowing behind her. "I am so sorry," she exclaimed, words tumbling out at machine-gun pace. "I was trying to catch up with my sister and I wasn't looking where I was going and, oh no, your luggage." Ben glanced at his duffel bag, now lying in an ornamental pond. "It's seen worse," he said with a genuine smile, releasing her shoulder. "I'm Ben. RWBY." RWBY rose. She fidgeted with her cape's clasp. "Are you a first year too? You seem calmer than everyone else." "That obvious." Ben retrieved his bag, giving it a perfunctory shake that sent water droplets scattering across the stone path. "And yeah, first year. Just trying not to look as lost as I feel." RWBY's expression brightened. "Me too. Well, actually, I'm supposed to be a third year at Signal, but Professor Ozpin invited me after I stopped a dust robbery and," she caught herself, cheeks flushing. "Sorry, I'm rambling. A dust robbery?" Ben raised an eyebrow, reassessing the girl. Behind her innocent appearance and nervous energy lay something more interesting. "Sounds like a story worth hearing." RWBY opened her mouth to respond when the Omnitrix chose that moment to emit a high-pitched whine. Ben's arm jerked involuntarily as green energy sparked around the device. "Whoa!" RWBY's eyes widened, silver irises reflecting the emerald glow. Is that your weapon? It looks like a watch, but it's doing, not watch things. Something like that. Ben gritted through clenched teeth, forcing the energy back under control through practiced mental exercises. It's a little temperamental today. I know exactly what you mean. Crescent Rose jams if I don't clean her firing mechanism after using ice dust. RWBY patted the compact form of her weapon affectionately. What does yours do? Does it transform? Is it dust-powered? What's its name? The barrage of questions was almost endearing, but Ben had more pressing concerns as the Omnitrix's faceplate began rotating on its own. It's complicated. And yes, it transforms. But not in the way you're thinking. The device gave another angry whine before settling down, the green glow fading to its normal subdued pulse. Crisis averted. For now. RWBY looked disappointed at his vague answer but seemed to sense his discomfort. Well, I should find my sister before the welcome ceremony. It was nice meeting you, Ben. Maybe we can talk weapons later. Count on it, Ben replied. Genuinely meaning it. There was something refreshing about RWBY's enthusiasm. Save me a spot if you get there first. RWBY's smile could have lit up a cavern of grim. With a nod and a swirl of her cape, she dashed off toward the main hall, leaving behind a few scattered rose petals that dissolved into motes of light. Ben watched her go, intrigued. Definitely not a normal semblance. He murmured to himself. The realization made him feel marginally better about his own unusual abilities. The main hall buzzed with nervous energy as first-year students clustered in anxious groups. Voices echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Ben scanned the crowd, looking for RWBY's distinctive red cape among the sea of prospective huntsmen and huntresses. Ben, over here. RWBY waved enthusiastically from near the front, standing beside a tall blonde girl who could only be the sister she'd mentioned. Weaving through the crowd with practiced ease, Ben made his way toward them. Noting the subtle shift in the room's attention, even without activating the Omnitrix, he had the kind of presence that drew eyes, the confident stride of someone who had faced down threats most couldn't imagine. Glad you found us, RWBY beamed. This is my sister, Young. The blonde gave him an appraising look, lilac eyes twinkling with mischief. So you're the guy who caught my little sister mid-hurricane. I'm impressed. Most people just get knocked over. Fast reflexes, Ben shrugged, downplaying the years of combat experience that had honed his instincts to near superhuman levels. I'm Ben Tennyson. Tennyson. Yang's eyebrows rose. Any relation to Max Tennyson? The hunter who took down the Chimera Grim pack single-handedly. Ben fought to keep his expression neutral. My grandfather, he admitted. You know your hunter history. Dad made sure we knew all the legends, RWBY chimed in. Grandpa Max is incredible. Is that why you're at Beacon? Following the family business. Before Ben could answer, the lights dimmed and Professor Ozpin stepped onto the stage, silver-haired and enigmatic, leaning slightly on his cane. The headmaster surveyed the assembled students with eyes that seemed to see beyond surfaces, lingering for just a fraction longer on Ben than the others. I'll keep this brief, Ozpin began, his voice carrying without apparent effort. You come here in search of knowledge, to hone your craft and acquire new skills. When you finish, you plan to dedicate your lives to the protection of the people. Ben felt a strange resonance with the words. Protection had been his purpose since the day the Omnitrix bonded with him at age 10. Different world, different threats, same responsibility. But I look amongst you, and all I see is wasted energy in need of purpose. Direction. You assume knowledge will free you of this, but your time at this school will prove that knowledge can only carry you so far. The Omnitrix pulsed against Ben's wrist, as if responding to Ozpin's speech. He clasped a hand over it instinctively. It is up to you to take the first step. With that cryptic conclusion, Ozpin exited the stage, leaving Prophase Soar Goodwitch to explain the practical details of their first night at Beacon. Well, that was encouraging. RWBY ventured hesitantly. He seemed off. Yang frowned. Like he wasn't fully there. Ben remained silent, watching Ozpin's retreating form. There had been something in the headmaster's gaze, recognition, perhaps. Impossible. They'd never met, and Ben had been careful to keep the Omnitrix's true nature secret since arriving in Vale. Tonight, all first-year students will gather in the ballroom, Goodwitch announced. Tomorrow, your initiation begins. Be ready. As the crowd began to disperse, RWBY turned to Ben with renewed enthusiasm. So about your weapon. The Omnitrix chose that moment to emit another high-pitched whine, louder than before. This time, Ben couldn't suppress the green energy that surged up his arm. I need some air, he managed through gritted teeth, already backing away. I'll catch up with you later. Without waiting for a response, he pushed through the crowd toward the nearest exit. Feeling the familiar and terrifying sensation of his DNA beginning to rewrite itself against his will. Not here, not now, not with hundreds of witnesses. The courtyard was mercifully empty as Ben stumbled into the shadow of a massive statue depicting Huntsman triumphant over Grimm. The irony wasn't lost on him as he fought his own inner monster. Come on, he muttered, twisting the Omnitrix's dial frantically, trying to at least direct the inevitable transformation into something manageable. If you're going to malfunction, at least give me something that won't destroy the school. Green light engulfed him like a solar flare, the familiar sensation of his body reconstructing itself molecule by molecule washing over him. Bones contracted and expanded, organs shifted. Skin hardened into crystalline structures. When the light faded, where Ben Tennyson had stood was now a being composed entirely of pale green crystal, Diamondhead, as he'd named this particular form. Could be worse, his voice resonated with a crystalline timbre as he examined his transformed state. At least I can pass for a faunus with a very unusual semblance if anyone sees me. The sound of slow, deliberate clapping made him whirl around, arm morphing instinctively into a blade. Professor Ozpin stood at the edge of the courtyard, cane in one hand, coffee mug in the other. Looking completely unsurprised by the crystalline being before him. Impressive, the headmaster commented mildly. I've seen many semblances in my time, Mr. Tennyson, but complete physiological transformation is unusual. Quote, Diamondhead lowered his blade arm, the crystal reconfiguring back into a hand. It's not what it looks like, he began, then stopped himself. Actually, it's exactly what it looks like. But there's an explanation. I'm sure there is. Ozpin took a measured sip from his mug. Just as I'm sure you'd prefer to have that conversation in a more private setting, and perhaps in your usual form. As if responding to Ozpin's suggestion, the Omnitrix symbol on Diamondhead's chest began flashing red, the warning that preceded a reversion. Seconds later, another flash of light enveloped him, and Ben stood in place of the crystal being, looking warily at the headmaster. How did you know? Ben asked, straightening his jacket. Ozpin's expression revealed nothing. Your grandfather and I are old friends, Mr. Tennyson. He mentioned you would be joining us this year, though he was selective about the details regarding your unique abilities. Grandpa Max told you about me. Ben frowned. He's usually more careful about the Omnitrix. He told me enough. Ozpin gestured toward the main tower with his cane. Perhaps you'd join me in my office. We have much to discuss before tomorrow's initiation, particularly regarding the apparent instability of your device. Ben hesitated, years of secrecy making him cautious. But if Grandpa Max trusted Ozpin, lead the way, he said finally. The clockwork mechanisms of Ozpin's tower office whirred and clicked around them, filling the silence as Ben finished explaining the Omnitrix's recent malfunctions. It's never been this unstable, he concluded. Random transformations, power fluctuations, transformations ending early. Something about Remnant, or something on Remnant, is affecting it. Ozpin leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Fascinating. And you say this device allows you to transform into 10 different forms? Originally, yes, Ben confirmed, absently turning the Omnitrix's dial. Over the years it's evolved, unlocked new transformations. Currently, I have access to about 20, though it seems to be adding more since we arrived on Remnant. Your grandfather mentioned you were not originally from our world, Ozpin said carefully, watching Ben's reaction. Ben's head snapped up. He told you that. Max Tennyson and I have shared many secrets over the decades. Ozpin rose, moving to the window that overlooked the academy grounds. He believed I could help you understand why the Omnitrix is responding to Remnant in such a peculiar manner. And can you, perhaps? Ozpin turned back to face him. What do you know about dust, Mr. Tennyson? The apparent non sequitur caught Ben off guard. It's this world's primary energy source. Has different elemental properties depending on the type. People use it to power technology and enhance their semblances. A textbook answer. Ozpin nodded, but incomplete. Dust is, in essence, nature's wrath captured in crystal form. Energy given physical shape, but its origins, where it comes from, why it exists only on remnant, remain one of our world's greatest mysteries. The headmaster returned to his desk, activating a holographic display. Images of dust crystals in various colors and formations hovered between them. Your Omnitrix, he continued, appears to be technology beyond anything we've developed. Yet it manipulates energy in ways remarkably similar to how our huntsmen use dust, transforming, enhancing, reconstructing. I believe your device is resonating with the ambient dust energy that permeates remnant. Ben considered this, looking down at the Omnitrix with new understanding. So it's, what, trying to integrate with this world's energy system? A reasonable hypothesis. Ozpin manipulated the holographic display, bringing up new images, ancient cave paintings showing humanoid figures transforming into various beings. But there may be more to it. These petroglyphs were discovered in ruins predating human civilization as we know it. They depict warriors who could change their forms at will, becoming creatures of tremendous power. Ben leaned forward, studying the images. The similarities to his own transformations were unmistakable. You're saying there were others like me? Here on Remnant, I'm saying, Ozpin replied carefully, that your Omnitrix may OTB is alien to our world as you believe, and that its current instability might be less a malfunction and more, an awakening. The implications sent Ben's mind racing. Could the Omnitrix have originated on Remnant? Was that why Grandpa Max had brought them to this world? Before he could pursue that line of questioning, the Omnitrix gave a warning beep, different from its previous malfunctions. This was the alert Grandpa Max had programmed to warn of approaching Grimm. Ozpin noticed his sudden tension. Mr. Tennyson. Grimm, Ben said simply, rising to his feet. Close, and a lot of them. As if confirming his words. Alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the academy. Ozpin's scroll lit up with emergency notifications. Impossible, the headmaster muttered, scanning the reports. The defensive perimeter hasn't been breached, and our sensors detect no Grimm within. An explosion rocked the tower, the shockwave rattling the massive gears overhead. Ben was already moving toward the elevator. Permission to handle this. Ozpin gave him a measuring look, then nodded once. Granted. But Mr. Tennyson, discretion would be advisable. Not all your fellow students will understand your unique abilities as I do. Understood. Ben stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding closed on Ozpin's concerned expression. As the elevator descended, Ben studied the Omnitrix, which had settled into its normal state despite the earlier malfunctions. Whatever was happening at Beacon had apparently triggered some kind of reset. All right, he muttered, let's see if you're ready to behave. He twisted the dial, cycling through silhouettes of his available transformations, and slammed his palm down on the faceplate as the elevator reached the ground floor. Green energy engulfed him, reconstructing his DNA into one of his most agile forms. When the doors opened, a sleek, velociraptor-like alien with wheels for feet and an aerodynamic helmet sprinted out at blinding speed. XLR-8, as Ben called this form, could reach velocities approaching the sound barrier, perfect for reconnaissance. The academy courtyard had transformed from serene campus to chaotic battleground in minutes. Students scrambled for weapons while faculty established defensive positions. Through his enhanced vision, XLR-8 could see the source of the attack, a massive breach in the cliff face below Beacon, WHER. Impossibly large Grimm were climbing toward the academy. Since when do Grimm coordinate attacks like this? He muttered, voice distorted by his helmet. A flash of red caught his attention. Ruby rose. Already fully armed with an enormous scythe, cutting down beowulfs with remarkable efficiency despite her age. Nearby, her sister Yang was engaged with a larger Ursa, her hair glowing like fire as she delivered devastating punches. XLR-8 blurred into motion, becoming little more than a streak of blue and black as he raced around the perimeter, assessing the threat. The Grimm weren't just numerous, they were organized, focusing their assault on specific structural points rather than attacking students directly. They're trying to bring down the CCT tower, he realized aloud. The Cross-Cont Inantal Transmit Tower was Beacon's communication lifeline to the other kingdoms. If it fell, the academy would be isolated. A scream cut through the chaos, a student cornered by 3 alpha Beowulfs near the tower's base. XLR-8 changed direction mid-stride, the world slowing to a crawl around him as he accelerated to maximum velocity. He reached the student, a girl with white hair pulled into an off-center ponytail, just as the lead Beowulf lunged. Time seemed to freeze as XLR-8 scooped her up and deposited her safely 20 meters away, then returned to deal with the Grimm before they'd even registered their prey's disappearance. What in the world? The white-haired girl began, disoriented by her sudden relocation. XLR-8 didn't wait for her to finish. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest was flashing red again. Another premature timeout. He needed to make this transformation count. Using his momentum, he created a cyclone around the Beowulfs, lifting them off their feet and slamming the M into each other with precisely calculated trajectories. As they disintegrated into black mist, XLR-8 skidded to a halt before the white-haired student, who had recovered enough to draw her rapier. "You're welcome," he quipped, then winced as the Omnitrix gave its final warning beep. "And I'd appreciate if you didn't mention the next part to anyone." Red light engulfed him before she could respond, leaving Ben Tennyson standing where the Velociraptor alien had been a moment before. The girl's ice-blue eyes widened in shock, her rapier dipping slightly. "You," she began, but was interrupted by a massive Grimm, an Ursa Major, charging toward them from behind. Ben reacted on instinct, tackling her sideways as the Grimm's massive paw swept through the space where she'd been standing. They rolled to safety behind a fallen pillar, Ben already cycling the Omnitrix dial for another transformation. "Stay down," he ordered, rising to his feet. "And seriously, what you just saw?" Not a word. Without waiting for her response, he slammed his palm down on the Omnitrix. This time, the transformation was instantaneous. No green flash, no sensation of reconstruction. One moment Ben stood there, the next he was Homungosaur, a 12-foot dinosaur-like behemoth with incredible strength. The Ursa Major roared a challenge. Homungosaur answered with one of his own, the sound reverberating across the courtyard and drawing attention from students and Grimm alike. Finally, he rumbled, cracking massive knuckles, "Something I can hit." The Grimm charged. Homungosaur met it head-on, catsy, hing its forepaws in his massive hands and halting its momentum through sheer strength. For a moment they were locked in a test of power, neither giving ground. Then Homungosaur smiled, a terrifying sight on his reptilian face. "My turn." With a massive heave, he lifted the Ursa Major overhead and slammed it into the ground with enough force to crack the stone pavement. Before it could recover, he delivered a devastating punch that shattered its bone mask and sent it dissolving into the characteristic black mist of defeated Grimm. The white-haired girl stared at him, rapier still raised defensively. "What are you?" she demanded. Homungosaur glanced down at her, about to respond, when movement caught his peripheral vision. RWBY rose, cornered by a swarm of smaller Grimm near the tower entrance. "Busy," he grunted, leaping toward RWBY with surprising agility for his size. Each footfall shook the ground as he closed the distance in seconds. RWBY was handling herself admirably, crest and rose a blur of motion as she cut down Grimm after Grimm. But they were overwhelming her through sheer numbers, each dispatched creature replaced by 2 more from the seemingly endless horde pouring up from the breach. Homungosaur landed beside her with a ground-shaking impact, creating a momentary pause in the Grimm assault. "Need a hand?" he offered, standing protectively over the much smaller girl. RWBY gaped up at him, silver eyes wide with astonishment. "Whoa, you're huge. Are you a huntsman? Is this your semblance?" A Beowulf lunged at them. Homungosaur swatted it aside with a casual backhand that sent it flying into a group of its companions. "Something like that," he replied, growing another 4 feet in height as he activated his species size-changing ability. "Let's clear these things out." RWBY grinned, twirling her scythe with renewed enthusiasm. Together, what followed was a display of combat synergy that seemed impossible for 2 fighters who had never worked together before. RWBY used Homungosaur as a springboard, launching herself into aerial attacks while he provided ground support. When she needed a moment to reload, he drew Grimm attention with thunderous roars. When he was surrounded, she'd sweep through with her scythe, creating openings. It was as if they'd trained together for years, each anticipating the other's movements perfectly. For Ben, who had always fought alone or with family, the experience was exhilarating. As they dispatched the last of the Grimm surrounding them, RWBY landed lightly beside him, breathing hard but smiling. That was amazing. We're like the perfect team. Before Homungosaur could respond, a shadow passed overhead, an enormous Nevermore, circling the tower with predatory intent. We need to take that down before it attacks the evacuation ships, RWBY said, suddenly serious as she assessed the airborne threat. But I can't reach it from here. Homungosaur looked from the Nevermore to RWBY, an idea forming. How good is your aim mid-air? RWBY blinked, then understood his implication. Her smile widened. The best. Then hold on. He knelt, offering his massive palm as a platform. RWBY stepped onto his hand without hesitation, adjusting her grip on Crescent Rose. Ready when you are, big guy. Homungosaur calculated trajectory, factoring in the Nevermore's speed and RWBY's weight. With careful precision, he launched her skyward with a controlled toss that sent her rocketing toward the giant Grimm. RWBY became a red blur, her cape streaming behind her as she intercepted the Nevermore at the apex of her ascent. Crescent Rose glinted in the sunlight as she hooked the blade around the creature's neck and fired repeated rounds, using the recoil to slice cleanly through. The Neve Armor's massive head separated from its body, both parts already dissolving as RWBY began her descent. Homungosaur positioned himself beneath her, catching her with surprising gentleness for his massive form. That was awesome, RWBY exclaimed, eyes bright with adrenaline as he set her down. We have got to do that again sometime. A slow clapping interrupted their moment of triumph. Both Ned to see the white-haired girl approaching, her expression a mixture of irritation and reluctant admiration. Very impressive, she said coolly. Though perhaps next time you could defeat the Grimm without destroying half the courtyard. Quote, Homungosaur looked around, suddenly aware of the collateral damage their battle had caused: cracked pavements, toppled columns, and one particularly unfortunate fountain that had been reduced to rubble. Oops, he rumbled sheepishly. RWBY stepped forward, somehow managing to look both apologetic and defiant. We were saving lives, Weiss. The courtyard can be fixed. Weiss. Homungosaur repeated, recognition dawning. As in Weiss Schnee. The white-haired girl straightened, pride evident in her posture. Yes, and you are. Before he could answer, the Omnitrix symbol on his chest began flashing red again. Someone who's about to have an awkward moment, he muttered. The red light engulfed him, leaving Ben standing in Homungosaur's place. The transformation reverting at the worst possible moment, in front of both RWBY and Weiss. RWBY's jaw dropped. Ben. Weiss's expression shifted from surprise to suspicion. You're the boy from earlier. The one who turned into that fast thing. Ben sighed, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, that would be me. Look, I can explain. You have a transformation semblance. RWBY interrupted, her words tumbling out in excited bursts. That's why your weapon looked like a watch, it activates your semblance. And you can turn into different things. That's the coolest semblance I've ever seen. It's not exactly a semblance. Ben began, but was cut off by another explosion near the breach. More Grimm were pouring through, these led by something Ben hadn't encountered before, a massive serpentine creature with multiple heads. Each one sporting a different bone mask configuration. A King Taijutsu variant, Weiss said, her voice tight with concern. I've never seen one with more than 2 heads before. Ben studied the approaching threat, mind racing through his available transformations. The Omnitrix had just reset, so he had a full charge, but after the way it had been malfunctioning. I need to get closer, he decided, activating the Omnitrix again. The familiar holographic display projected above the dial, showing silhouettes of his available aliens. RWBY and Weiss watch, head in fascination as he selected a form and slammed his palm down on the device. Green energy erupted around him, reforming his body into a moth-like being with 4 wings and a black and blue color scheme, Big Chill. A transformation with ice powers and intangibility. Stay here, his raspy, chilling voice ordered as frost formed around his mouth. I'll handle the snake. Without waiting for their response, Big Chill spread his wings and launched into the air, flying toward the multi-headed Grimm with ghostly grace. The King Taijutsu variant sensed his approach, all 5 heads turning to track his movement with glowing red eyes. As Big Chill drew near, the central head, larger than the others and crowned with a more elaborate bone structure, opened its maw and expelled a jet of black mist. Big Chill turned intangible, allowing the attack to pass harmlessly through him. Interesting, he murmured. Grim that can use ranged attacks. That's new. He circled the creature, analyzing its movement patterns and the coordination between heads. Unlike normal King Taijutsu that had 2 opposing heads with minimal intelligence, this variant showed disturbing signs of strategic thought. The heads worked in concert, covering blind spots and setting up combination attacks. Someone's been upgrading the local wildlife, Big Chill commented as he dodged another blast of dark energy. Time to cool things down. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled a stream of freezing vapor that engulfed the leftmost head. Ice formed instantly, encasing the head in a thick crystalline prison. Big Chill repeated the process on the rightmost head, working methodically to immobilize the threat one section at a time. The remaining heads redoubled their attacks, forcing him to phase through solid matter to evade. As he emerged from the ground beneath the Grim, Big Chill noticed something odd. A small metallic device embedded at the base of the central head, pulsing with an eerie green light similar to the Omnitrix's energy signature. That can't be a coincidence, he muttered, swooping closer for a better look. The central head twisted with impossible speed, jaws snapping shut inches from Big Chill's face. Only his intangibility saved him from being devoured. As he phased backward through the Grim's body, he caught a clearer glimpse of the device. Definitely technology, definitely not natural to the Grim. And definitely connected to whatever was making the Omnitrix malfunction. Big Chill circled back around, formulating a new plan. Have to remove that device. But first, let's eliminate some distractions. He flew high above the remaining 3 heads, then dive-bombed toward them, turning tangible at the last second to release a concentrated blast of freezing energy directly down the throat of one head. The Grim convulsed as ice spread from within, freezing it from the inside out. 2 heads remained, the central one with the device and 1 auxiliary head that snapped and hissed with increasing desperation. Movement on the ground caught Big Chill's attention. RWBY and Weiss had ignored his instructions to stay back and were now approaching the immobilized sections of the Grim, weapons ready. I told you to stay put. He called down, narrowly avoiding another blast of dark energy. You looked like you could use some help. RWBY shouted back, already climbing up the Ozone portions of the Grim to reach the still active heads. Weiss, meanwhile, was creating a series of glyphs, complex magical circles that seemed to bend the laws of physics. She launched herself from one to another, ascending rapidly until she was level with the auxiliary head. I'll distract this one, she called to Ben. You focus on the leader. Before Big Chill could protest, Weiss engaged the auxiliary head in a dazzling display of swordsmanship and dust manipulation. Her rapier left trails of fire, ice, and lightning as she danced around the Grim's attacks with ballistic precision. With Weiss occupying one threat, Big Chill turned his attention to the central head and its mysterious device. The head tracked his movement, intelligence gleaming in its red eyes in a way that seemed almost familiar. Who sent you? Big Chill asked, not expecting an answer but hoping to distract the creature. To his shock, the Grim responded with a sound that approximated laughter. Ben Tennyson, it hissed, voice grating like stone on metal. The Omnitrix bearer. Big Chill faltered mid-flight, nearly dropping out of the air in surprise. You can talk. This vessel serves as my voice, the Grim replied. I have come for what is rightfully mine. Let me guess. Big Chill recovered his composure, circling warily. You want the Omnitrix. Get in line. The creature's response was another blast of dark energy. This one tinged with green, the same green as the Omnitrix. Big Chill phased through it, but not before feeling a disturbing resonance with his transformation. The attack hadn't just passed through him. It had attempted to interface with the Omnitrix symbol on his chest. Okay, now I'm concerned, he muttered. Meanwhile, RWBY had reached the top of the frozen sectile. Onin was firing precision shots at the central head from Crescent Rose's sniper configuration. The Grim barely seemed to notice, its attention fixed solely on Big Chill and the Omnitrix. The device responds to me. The creature continued. It was created for me. You were merely a temporary custodian, child. Sorry. But the Omnitrix and I are kind of a package deal at this point, Big Chill retorted, diving toward the metallic device embedded in the Grimm's scales. The central head twisted to intercept him, but a well-placed shot from RWBY staggered it momentarily, just enough for Big Kai LL to phase his arm through the creature's scales and grasp the device. Pain lanced through him the instant he touched it. Not physical pain, but something deeper, as if the device was attempting to rewrite his very consciousness. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest flashed erratically, cycling between green, red, and colors he'd never seen it display before. "What are you?" Big Chill gasped, struggling to maintain his transformation as the device seemed to leech energy from the Omnitrix. The Grimm's eyes glowed brighter. "I am Vilgax, conqueror of 10 worlds, rightful wielder of the Omnitrix. And you, Ben Tennyson, are an obstacle to be removed." The name struck a chord in Ben's memory. Vilgax had been his nemesis in their original world, an alien warlord obsessed with claiming the Omnitrix. But how had he followed them to Remnant? And why was he controlling Grimm? With a supreme effort, Big Chill phased the device out of the Grimm's body. The moment it lost contact with its host, the creature let out an unearthly howl. All 5 heads, even the frozen ones, convulsed simultaneously. "Ben!" RWBY called out in alarm as cracks appeared in the ice encasing the immobilized heads. "Get back," Big Chill warned, clutching the pulsing device. "It's destabilizing." Weiss created a series of glyphs that allowed RWBY to descend rapidly from her perch. Big Chill swooped down to join them, turning tangible just long enough to hand the device to Weiss. "Contain this," he instructed. "Your glyphs, can you create a barrier?" Weiss nodded, immediately understanding. With precise movements of her rapier, she created a complex array of glyphs around the device, forming a shimmering containment field. The King Taijutsu variant was disintegrating, not in the normal way of defeated Grimm, but violently. Chunks of its body erupting into caustic black mist. The central head retained its cohesion longest, red eyes fixed on Big Chill with malevolent intelligence. "This is merely the beginning, Tennyson," it hissed as its form began to dissolve. "Remnant holds secrets beyond your comprehension. The Omnitrix was born here, and here it shall return to its true master." With those ominous words, the creature collapsed completely into swirling darkness that dispersed on the wind. A heavy silence fell over the battlefield as the remaining Grimm, suddenly leaderless, retreated back through the breach. Students and faculty began regrouping, assessing casualties and damages. The Omnitrix gave its warning beep, and moments later, Ben stood where Big Chill had been. He looked exhausted, his face pale and drawn. "That," RWBY began, struggling to find words. "That was impossible," Weiss finished, staring at the contained device still floating within her glyph barrier. "Grimm don't speak. They don't use technology, and they certainly don't know specific people by name." Ben leaned against a broken column, legs suddenly unsteady. "They do when they're being controlled by someone who knows exactly who I am." RWBY stepped closer, concern evident in her silver eyes. "Ben, what's going on? That thing talked like it knew you." "It did." Ben straightened, decision made. After what they'd just experienced, RWBY and Weiss deserved some explanation. "But it's a long story, and not one I can tell here." Weiss maintained her glyph barrier around the device, which had stopped pulsing but still emanated an unsettling energy. "Then where? Because after what just happened, you owe us answers." "I know." Ben ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. "Meet me at the dormitory rooftop after curfew. I'll tell you what I can." RWBY nodded immediately, her trust immediate and complete in a way that touched something in Ben. Weiss was more hesitant, her analytical mind clearly working through scenarios and possibilities. "Fine," she said finally. "But bring this, whatever it is." She nodded toward the contained device. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Ben agreed, taking custody of the device, safely contained in a smaller version of Weiss's glyph that she assured would hold for several hours. As they parted ways to help with cleanup efforts, Ben caught sight of Professor Ozpin watching from the tower balcony, his expression unreadable. Somehow, Ben suspected the headmaster had witnessed everything, including Vilgax's ominous claims about the Omnitrix's origin. "What aren't you telling me, Professor?" Ben murmured to himself. "And what does Vilgax know about the Omnitrix that I don't?" Questions for another time. Right now, he had a breach to help seal and explanations to prepare for two girls who'd just witnessed abilities no semblance could explain. As the sun set over Beacon Academy, casting long shadows across the damaged courtyard, Ben Tennyson looked down at the Omnitrix, his burden, his responsibility, his power. For 7 years, he'd believed he understood what it was and where it came from. Now, standing on an alien world that somehow felt connected to the device in ways he couldn't yet comprehend, Ben wondered if everything he thought he knew about the Omnitrix was wrong. And if Vilgax, or whatever ion of his old nemesis now existed in this world, was right about the Omnitrix, returning to its true master. What did that mean for Ben, whose identity had become inextricably linked with the alien device? The Omnitrix pulsed gently against his wrist, as if responding to his thoughts. Whatever secrets Remnant held about its origins, Ben would discover them. And whatever Vilgax was planning, he would stop it. He always did. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Dust and Diamonds. The fractured moon of Remnant cast silver light across Beacon's rooftop, illuminating 3 figures huddled in conspiratorial silence. Ben leaned against a ventilation duct, the Omnitrix occasionally pulsing with gentle green light. Across from him, RWBY sat cross-legged on the ground, silver eyes wide with anticipation, while Weiss stood with perfect posture, arms crossed defensively. "Let me get this straight," Weiss said after Ben finished his explanation. "You're claiming that watch isn't a weapon or semblance activation device, but alien technology that rewrites your DNA?" Ben nodded. "I know how it sounds. Impossible," Weiss declared, though her voice lacked conviction. After witnessing his transformations firsthand, skepticism was difficult to maintain. RWBY, meanwhile, was practically vibrating with excitement. "So cool. How many aliens can you turn into? Do they all have different powers? Can I see them all?" "RWBY," Weiss chided, "focus on the concerning parts. Like how a talking Grimm knew his name and claimed this Omnitrix belongs to something called Vilgax." Ben held up the device they'd extracted from the King Taijutsu, still contained within Weiss's fading glyph barrier. In the moonlight, its pulsing had slowed to an occasional flicker. "Vilgax has been after the Omnitrix since I was 10, he explained. But he shouldn't be here. He shouldn't even know about Remnant." "Perhaps you should start from the beginning," suggested a new voice. All 3 teenagers whirled toward the stairwell door where Professor Ozpin stood, cane in one hand, ever-present coffee mug in the other. His expression betrayed nothing as he approached. "Professor," Weiss straightened, looking guilty. "We were just discussing Mr. Tennyson's unique circumstances," Ozpin finished smoothly. "Yes, I'm aware, though I believe you've omitted certain details in your explanation, Ben." Ben shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't sure how much I should share. Under normal circumstances, discretion would be prudent." Ozpin's gaze shifted to the device. "But after today's events, partial truths may prove more dangerous than complete ones." RWBY and Weiss exchanged confused glances. "What's he talking about?" RWBY asked. "What didn't you tell us?" Ben sighed, looking to Ozpin for guidance. The Master gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I'm not from Remnant," Ben said finally. "Neither is my grandfather or the Omnitrix. We come from another world entirely." The silence that followed was profound. Weiss's eyes narrowed in calculation while RWBY's widened further, if that were possible. "Another world," RWBY whispered. "Like the moon." "Another dimension," Ben clarified. "A parallel Earth where Grimm don't exist. But aliens do. Where I got the Omnitrix when I was 10 years old during a camping trip with my grandfather." That's. Weiss struggled to find words. "Awesome," RWBY supplied, bouncing to her feet. "You're literally an alien. Technically, I'm human," Ben corrected with a small smile. "The Omnitrix just lets me transform into aliens." Ozpin stepped closer, examining the containment device. "This, however, is not of Mr. Tennyson's world, nor is it technology native to Remnant." "Then what is it?" Weiss asked, scientific curiosity overcoming her skepticism. "A bridge," Ozpin replied cryptically. "Between worlds, between technologies. Someone, or something, has found a way to merge dust energy with capabilities similar to the Omnitrix." Ben frowned. "Vilgax. But how? He couldn't have followed us here." Unless, Ozpin's voice grew quieter, he was always here. A version of him, at least. The implications sent a chill through the rooftop gathering. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix, its familiar weight suddenly strange against his skin. What did it mean that the Omnitrix was born here? He asked. Ozpin took a deliberate sip from his mug before answering. There are stories, ancient legends predating the kingdoms, of warriors who could change their forms to battle creatures of darkness. I once believed them to be early accounts of semblances, but now. You think the Omnitrix originally came from Remnant? Ben's voice betrayed his shock. I think, Ozpin replied carefully, that nothing in any world is truly coincidental, Mr. Tennyson. Your grandfather bringing you to Remnant, the Omnitrix's increased instability here, this attack, they are threads in a tapestry we cannot yet fully see. RWBY, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. So what do? We prepare, Ozpin said simply. Tomorrow is still initiation day. Ms. Rose, Ms. Schnee, I trust you understand the sensitive nature of what you've learned. Both girls nodded solemnly. As for you, Mr. Tennyson, Ozpin continued, I suggest you become better acquainted with our world's primary energy source. Understanding how dust interacts with your Omnitrix may prove crucial. I can help with that, Weiss offered immediately, her academic instincts engaging. The Schnee family has been refining dust for generations. Ozpin smiled faintly. An excellent suggestion. I'll arrange for you to have access to the dust laboratories following initiation. With that, he turned to leave, pausing at the door. Rest well. Tomorrow will test you in ways you cannot anticipate. Quote. After the headmaster departed, an awkward silence fell over the three students. So, RWBY rocked on her heels. Aliens, huh? Ben couldn't help but laugh, the tension breaking. Yeah, aliens. Quote. I still have approximately 1,000 questions, Weiss said, her tone suggesting this was a conservative estimate. And I'll answer them, Ben promised. But Ozpin's right, we should get some sleep before initiation. As they headed toward the stairs, RWBY suddenly grabbed Ben's arm. Wait, you never said how many aliens you can turn into. Currently, Ben considered, around 20 that I've mastered. But the Omnitrix contains thousands of different genetic samples. RWBY's squeal of excitement echoed across the rooftop. This is going to be the best year ever. Weiss rolled her eyes, but Ben caught the smallest hint of a smile on her lips before she turned away. Morning arrived with piercing clarity, the forest stretching below the cliffs of Beacon bathed in golden light. First-year students lined up on launch platforms, listening as Professors Ozpin and Goodwich explained the initiation. The first person you make eye contact with after landing will be your partner for the next 4 years, Ozpin concluded, sipping his coffee as if he hadn't just delivered life-altering news. Ben, standing between Young and a quiet boy with magenta-streaked hair, processed this information with mild alarm. Partnerships determined by random eye contact seemed like a recipe for disaster. Questions. Ozpin scanned the line of students, his gaze pausing momentarily on Ben. No. Good. Prepare for launch. The platform at the far end catapulted its occupant skyward with a mechanical whine. One by one, students were launched into the forest, their surprised yelps fading into the distance. This is going to be fun, Yang grinned, pulling on aviator sunglasses as her platform activated, sending her soaring with an enthusiastic, woohoo. Ben's turn approached rapidly. He eyed the Omnitrix, considering his options. The device had been suspiciously well behaved since yesterday's confrontation, but he didn't trust the stability would last. Better to transform before launch rather than risk a malfunction midair. Activating the Omnitrix, he cycled through his available aliens. Stinkfly would give him flight control, but was relatively fragile. Cannonbolt could handle the impact, but navigation would be problematic. Mr. Tennyson, Ozpin's voice broke his concentration. Any preference for your landing strategy? Ben looked up, realizing he was next. With a decisive twist, he selected an alien silhouette and slammed his palm down on the Omnitrix just as the platform launched him skyward. Emerald energy engulfed him mid-trajectory. His body elongated, hardened, becoming crystalline in structure, Diamond Head once again, a form both durable and precise. As he arced through the air, Diamond Head assessed his trajectory in the rapidly approaching treeline. With practiced calculation, he morphed his arm into a curved blade and slashed at passing tree limbs, controlling his descent through a series of redirected falls rather than a single crash landing. He hit the forest floor in a controlled roll, crystalline body absorbing the impact without damage. Rising to his feet, Diamond Head scanned the immediate area, orienting himself toward the temple Ozpin had mentioned. North is that way, he muttered, reconfiguring his crystal hand back to normal. Now I just need to. A twig snapped behind him. Diamond Head whirled, arm automatically morphing into a jagged blade, only to find himself face to face with Weiss Gwen. Her rapier was drawn, pointed directly at his crystalline chest. For a tense moment, neither moved. Ben, she finally asked, recognition dawning in her ice-blue eyes. Diamond Head lowered his blade arm. Guess we're partners now. Weiss sheathed her rapier with a sigh that suggested resigned acceptance rather than enthusiasm. I suppose there are worse options. At least you seem competent in combat. High praise, Diamond Head remarked dryly. Let me change back before we head out. The Omnitrix symbol on his chest began flashing red, right on cue. Seconds later, Ben stood in Diamond Head's place, adjusting his jacket. Fascinating, Weiss murmured, studying him with scientific interest. The mass conservation alone defies known physics. If it helps, it doesn't make much sense in my world either, Ben replied, starting north. The temple should be this way. Weiss fell into step beside him. So your transformations, they're complete physiological changes. You actually become these aliens. Down to the cellular level, Ben confirmed. I gain all their natural abilities and instincts. Though it took years to master using them effectively. And the watch, the Omnitrix, it contains the genetic material for these species. Ben nodded. Thousands of them. Though, I can only access a fraction at any given time. Weiss processed this, her analytical mind clearly working through implications. The applications for such technology are staggering. Which is why everyone from intergalactic warlords to mad scientists has tried to steal it, Ben said grimly. Including Vilgax, the entity controlling that Grim yesterday. Their conversation paused as the Y navigated a particularly dense section of underbrush. Ben noticed Weiss moved with practiced grace, her footfalls nearly silent despite the forest debris. Not just a privileged heiress, then, but someone with serious training. This Vilgax, she finally said as they emerged into a clearer area. If he's from your world, how did he end up on Remnant? That's the million-lean question, Ben replied. Ozpin seems to think he might not be the same Vilgax I knew, more like Remnant's version of him. Weiss frowned. That implies parallel evolution or some form of interdimensional constant. Statistically improbable. Yet here we are, Ben shrugged. Nothing about the Omnitrix has ever been statistically probable. A distant explosion interrupted their discussion, followed by the distinctive crack of weapons fire. Sounds like others have encountered resistance, Weiss noted, hand moving to her rapier. Ben activated the Omnitrix, cycling through options. We should probably expect the same. This forest feels too quiet. The moment he said it, the underbrush ahead erupted as a massive Ursa charged into their path, red eyes glowing with malice. Unlike standard Ursa, this one had strange crystalline growths protruding from its bone armor, growths that pulsed with the same sickly green energy as the device they'd extracted yesterday. Modified Grim, Weiss said, shifting into a combat stance. Like the King Taijutsu. Quote, Ben slammed down on the Omnitrix without hesitation. Green light flashed, and where Ben had stood was now a 7-foot humanoid composed of living magma contained within volcanic rock, heat blast. One of his earliest and most powerful transformations. I'll take point, Heat Blast said, his voice crackling like flames. You circle around. Weiss nodded, immediately understanding his strategy. As Heat Blast launched a barrage of fireballs to draw the Ursa's attention, she created a series of glyphs that allowed her to move with impossible speed and precision around the battlefield. The Ursa roared in pain and rage as Heat Blast's flames connected with its fur, but the crystalline growths on its armor glowed brighter in response. To Heat Blast's surprise, the flames seemed to be absorbed by the crystals rather than burning the creature. It's using the crystals to process the energy. He called to Weiss, like some kind of dust conversion. Weiss, mid-leap between glyphs, adjusted her strategy instantly. Her rapier's cylinder rotated with a mechanical click, settling on light blue dust. Switch to physical attacks, she commanded, driving her rapier into the ground as she landed. A wave of ice erupted from the point of impact, racing toward the Ursa and encasing its hind legs. The creature struggled against its frozen restraints, the crystals on its back pulsing frantically. Heat Blast changed tactics, concentrating his inner flame to superheat his rocky fists rather than projecting fire. He charged the immobilized Grimm, delivering a devastating punch to its bone mask that cracked the armored plate. The Ursa howled, swinging massive paws in desperate counterattack. One caught Heat Blast's shoulder, sending him skidding back several feet but causing no real damage to his magma-based physiology. The crystals, Weiss called out, launching herself from a glyph for another strike. They're similar to raw dust formations, but corrupted somehow. As if responding to her assessment, the crystals suddenly discharged the stored energy, releasing a shockwave that shattered the ice restraints and knocked both Heat Blast and Weiss backward. Recovering quickly, Heat Blast noticed the crystals now glowed with subdued crimson energy, like fire dust, but distorted. The Ursa seemed newly invigorated, its movements faster and more coordinated than typical Grimm. It's adapting, he realized aloud. Using my own energy signature against us. Weiss rejoined him, a thin cut on her cheek the only evidence of the blast's impact. Then we change the equation, she said with cool determination. She raised her rapier, summoning a complex configuration of glyphs that surrounded the Ursa in a spherical pattern. Each glyph pulsed with different colored energy, a complete spectrum of dust types. On my mark, she instructed, concentration evident in her furrowed brow. Hit it with everything you have, but aim for the main body, not the crystals. Heat Blast nodded, understanding her plan. He gathered his thermal energy, compressing it into a concentrated ball of white-hot plasma between his palms. Now, Weiss commanded, activating her glyph array with a precise gesture. The glyphs discharged simultaneously, bombarding the Ursa with contradictory dust energies, ice, fire, lightning, gravity, and more, creating a chaotic energy field that overwhelmed the crystal's ability to process and adapt. In the same moment, Heat Blast released his compressed plasma bolt, striking the disoriented Grimm dead center. The combination of Weiss's dust assault and Heat Blast's thermal energy created a spectacular reaction, a miniature supernova of conflicting elements that consumed the Ursa entirely. When the light faded and the dust settled, nothing remained of the creature except scattered crystal fragments that quickly dissolved into mist. Heat Blast let out a low whistle. That was impressive. Basic dust interaction theory, Weiss replied. Though she couldn't entirely hide her satisfaction. Contradictory energies create destructive interference patterns when properly calibrated. The Omnitrix symbol on Heat Blast's chest began flashing, and moments later, Ben stood in his place, looking thoughtfully at the dissipating crystal fragments. Those weren't natural to the Grimm, he said. Someone implanted them. Just like the device in the King Taijutsu. Weiss knelt to examine the few fragments that hadn't yet dissolved. They appear to be attempting to replicate dust properties, but with the energy signature I observed in your device. The Omnitrix, Ben clarified, looking down at the watch-like apparatus. Vilgax is trying to merge its technology with Remnant's dust. Why? Weiss asked, rising to her feet. What would be the purpose? Ben's expression darkened. Control. The Omnitrix can rewrite genetic code. If he's found a way to use dust as a conduit for that capability, he could potentially control all Grimm, Weiss finished. Understanding dawning. Create an army that adapts to any threat. The implications hung heavy between them as they resumed their journey toward the temple, but more alert to their surroundings after the encounter. Your control over those transformations is remarkable, Weiss commented after several minutes of silence. How many years did you say you've had this device? 7, Ben replied. Though it's changed over time, evolved. The version I have now is more advanced than the original. And it chose you, specifically. Ben smiled ruefully. Actually, it was meant for my grandfather. I was just in the right place at the wrong time when it dropped from space. Weiss processed this with obvious skepticism. That seems improbable. Trust me, I've had the same thought about 1,000 times, Ben laughed. Especially when I was 10 and had no idea what I was doing. I nearly burned down a forest the first time I turned into Heat Blast. This admission seemed to surprise Weiss. You mean you weren't instantly proficient? Not even close, Ben confirmed. Each transformation has different abilities, different anatomies, different instincts. Learning to control just one would be challenging, mastering 20 took years. Something in Weiss's expression shifted, a subtle softening around her eyes. That's actually quite impressive. Dedication like that is uncommon. Quote, coming from her, Ben suspected this constituted high praise. Thanks. Though necessity was a big motivator. When alien warlords are trying to kill you, you learn fast. They crested a small rise. And the temple came into view in a clearing below, a circular stone structure with pedestals arranged around its perimeter. Several were already empty, indicating other students had arrived before them. Looks like the relics are chess pieces, Ben observed as they approached. Weiss studied the remaining options with a critical eye. White Knight, she decided, picking up the piece. Symbolic of strategic movement and protection. Ben raised an eyebrow. Or it's just a chess piece. Everything has meaning, Ben, Weiss replied with surprising seriousness. Especially in a test designed by someone like Professor Ozpin. Before Ben could respond, the ground shook with a tremendous impact. From the tree line opposite their position emerged a death stalk. LKER, a massive scorpion-like grim with enormous pincers and a glowing stinger. Like the Ursa they'd encountered, this one sported crystalline growths along its armored carapace. Another modified grim, Ben muttered. Activating the Omnitrix. They're targeting the initiation specifically. The Death Stalker wasn't alone. As it charged into the clearing, they spotted two figures running ahead. F it. RWBY and a tall red-headed girl in bronze armor. RWBY. Ben called out, selecting an alien form. Incoming. RWBY glanced back, silver eyes widening at the sight of Ben and Weiss. Hey, partners, she shouted with incongruous cheerfulness given the circumstances. Meet Pyrrha. We're being chased. We noticed, Weiss replied dryly, readying her rapier. Ben slammed down on the Omnitrix, transforming into a massive tiger-like being with no eyes, enormous claws, and jaws that could crush stone. Wrath, a form that traded intelligence for raw strength and ferocity. Let me tell you something. Giant scorpion grim with weird crystal growths. Wrath bellowed, dropping into a wrestler's stance. Nobody chases Wrath's friends except Wrath. Weiss blinked at the sudden personality shift. Is he always like this in that form? RWBY, who had reached them along with Pyrrha, grinned despite the danger. No idea, but it's kind of awesome. Wrath charged the Death Stalker head-on, a direct PP roach that seemed suicidal given the creature's size and armaments. Yet his speed and ferocity caught the grim off guard. As its stinger descended in a deadly arc, Wrath caught it mid-strike with his bare hands. Cosmic clothesline, he roared, using the stinger as leverage to flip over the Death Stalker's head and deliver a powerful blow to its unprotected back. The Death Stalker screeched in pain, its pincers snapping wildly as it tried to dislodge the tiger-like alien now riding its back like a rodeo performer. He's certainly enthusiastic, Pyrrha observed, readying her spear and shield. Weiss sighed. We should assist before his bravado gets him killed. She turned to RWBY. Can you target the crystal formations? They appear to be the source of the Grim's enhanced capabilities. RWBY nodded. Unfolding crescent rose into its sniper configuration. On it. As RWBY began firing precision shots at the crystal growths, Weiss created a series of time dilation glyphs around Pyrrha. These will enhance your speed temporarily, she explained. Target the joints where the armor is thinnest. Pyrrha adapted to the enhancement instantly, becoming a bronze blur as she darted between the Death Stalker's legs. Her spear striking with surgical precision at vulnerable points. Meanwhile, Wrath was engaged in what could only be described as a wrestling match with the Grim's stinger. His incoherent battle cries echoing across the clearing. Polaris piledriver, he shouted, somehow managing to suplex the stinger into the ground, momentarily immobilizing it. The coordinated assault began taking its toll. RWBY's shots cracked several crystal formations, causing them to pulse erratically. Pyrrha's strikes had damaged multiple leg joints, limiting the creature's mobility. And Wrath, for all his berserker tactics, had effectively neutralized the deadly stinger. We need to finish this, Weiss called out, noticing the crystals beginning to glow with accumulated energy. The Same discharge phenomenon they'd witnessed with the Ursa. RWBY landed beside her, ejecting a spent magazine from Crescent Rose. Ideas. Yes. Weiss's eyes narrowed in concentration as she formed a plan. But I need Wrath to get clear so I can immobilize it completely. On it. RWBY disappeared in a burst of rose petals, reappearing on the Death Stalker's back beside Wrath. Whatever she said to him was lost in the chaos. But moments later, both leapt clear as the Death Stalker prepared to discharge its accumulated energy. Weiss seized the opportunity, plunging her rapier into the ground with a precise application of ice dust. A massive glacier erupted beneath the Death Stalker, encasing its lower body in solid ice that climbed rapidly up its torso. The creature's attempt to discharge energy was interrupted by the flash freezing process, creating a feedback loop within its crystal implants. They began to crack, leak, and finally shatter in a cascade of destructive energy that consumed the Grim from within. As the Death Stalker dissolved into shadow and ice fragments, the Omnitrix symbol on Wrath's chest began flashing red. Moments later, Ben stood where the tiger alien had been, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sorry about that," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Wrath tends to be a bit aggressive." "A bit." Weiss arched an eyebrow, but there was a hint of amusement in her tone. RWBY bounced excitedly. "That was so cool. You were all cosmic clothesline." And then Weiss was like whoosh with the ice and Pyrrha was super fast and "Perhaps we should collect our relic and return to the cliffs," Pyrrha suggested gently, interrupting RWBY's enthusiastic recap. "I believe our objective is complete." Ben glanced at Weiss. "White Knight." She nodded, holding up the chess piece they'd selected. RWBY grinned, producing an identical piece. "We match. That has to be a good sign, right?" As if answering her question, a chorus of Nevermore cries echoed overhead. Looking up, they spotted 3 of the massive raven-like Grim circling the clearing, each bearing the now familiar crystal implants. "You just had to ask," Ben sighed, reaching for the Omnitrix again. Ben Tennyson, RWBY Rose. Weiss Schnee, Yang Xiaolong. Professor Ozpin's voice carried across the auditorium as the 4 students stood on stage. "You retrieved the White Knight pieces. From this day forward, you will work together as Team RWBY. Applause filled the hall as their faces appeared on the massive display screen, along with their newly designated team name. "Led by Ben Tennyson," Ozpin concluded with a subtle nod toward Ben. Ben blinked in surprise. Leadership hadn't been something he'd considered or sought. His experience had always been solo work or family teams, not directing others. RWBY squealed with delight, throwing her arms around him in a congratulatory hug. "Team leader. That's so awesome." Yang offered a fist bump. "Nice going, transformation boy. Just don't let the power go to your head." Weiss's reaction was more reserved, a slight tightening of her posture, a barely perceptible narrowing of her eyes. Not outright displeasure, but not enthusiasm either. As they exited the stage to make room for the next team, Ben fell into step beside Weiss. "Something wrong?" he asked quietly. She maintained her composure, eyes forward. "Why would anything be wrong?" "Because you look like someone just told you your coffee order was permanently changed to decaf," Ben replied. Despite herself, Weiss's lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "Your observational skills are more developed than I initially credited." "So what is it?" Ben pressed gently. "The team assignment, or me being leader." Weiss sighed, barely audible. "I was raised to lead, Ben. Trained since childhood to command, to direct, to take responsibility. Being subordinate isn't something that comes naturally." Her candor surprised him. "I wasn't exactly campaigning for the position," he admitted. "If you want my honest opinion, I think RWBY has more natural leadership potential than either of us." "RWBY." Weiss couldn't hide her incredulity. "She's 15 and hyperactive. She's also a tactical genius who instantly assesses weapon capabilities and battlefield conditions," Ben pointed out. "Did you see how quickly she coordinated our attack against those Nevermores?" Weiss fell silent, considering his words. Finally, she spoke with measured care. "Perhaps I have been hasty in some of my assessments." Coming from Weiss, Ben suspected this constituted a significant concession. "Look, I've been fighting aliens, monsters, and supervillains since I was 10. But I've never led a team. I'm going to need your help, all of your help, to make this work." The tension in Weiss's shoulders eased slightly. Well, at least you recognize your limitations. That's a promising start. Ben laughed, sensing the ice between them beginning to thaw. I'll take that as a vote of confidence. Schnee. Team RWBY, RWBY declared, joining their conversation with characteristic enthusiasm. It sounds like a coffee blend. Better than some alternatives, Yang added, slinging an arm around her sister. We could have been Team BRYP, burp. Weiss closed her eyes in elegant suffering. 4 years of this. What did I do to deserve such punishment? But Ben caught the subtle curve of her lips. Not quite a smile, but no longer the rigid line of disapproval she'd worn since their first meeting. Progress, of a sort. Professor Goodwich approached their group, scroll in hand. Team RWBY. Professor Ozpin would like to see you in his office tomorrow morning regarding your specialized training requirements. Her gaze lingered on Ben, clearly aware of his unique circumstances. Additionally, Miss Schnee, she continued, as you'll be assisting Mr. Tennyson with dust applications research, I've arranged for you both to have access to the advanced laboratories. Your credentials have been updated accordingly. Weiss straightened, her expression brightening at this academic recognition. Thank you, Professor. We'll make good use of the facilities. As Goodwich departed, RWBY bounced on her toes. Specialized training. Does that mean we all get to learn about the Omnitrix? Inside voice, RWBY, Yang reminded her, glancing at nearby students. Secret alien watch, remember. RWBY clapped her hands over her mouth. Right, sorry. Ben shook his head, amused despite himself. Let's head to our dorm. I think we all could use some rest after today. Their assigned dormitory was spacious by Beacon standards, 4 beds, desks, and storage units arranged with military precision. Large windows overlooked the campus grounds, moonlight spilling across the polished floor. Home sweet home, Yang declared, tossing her bag onto a bed. Dibs on the one by the window. RWBY immediately claimed the bed beside her sister's. Ooh, we should decorate. Make it feel homey. Weiss surveyed the room with a critical eye. There are more pressing concerns than aesthetics. We should establish a study schedule and training rotation. Already planning? Ben asked, setting his duffel on one of the remaining beds. We haven't even had our first class yet. Preparation is key to success, Weiss replied primly, unpacking her belongings with meticulous care. Particularly given our unusual team dynamics. Ben couldn't argue with that assessment. Between his alien transformations, RWBY's prodigy status, Weiss's corporate heiress background, and Yang's, well, youngness. They were hardly a conventional team. As they settled in for their first night as Team RWBY, Ben found himself watching his new teammates with curious wonder. In 7 years of wielding the Omnitrix, he'd faced countless threats and challenges, but always with family at his side or solo. This, a team of peers, strangers becoming companions, was uncharted territory. RWBY and Yang clearly shared a comfortable sisterly dynamic, arguing good-naturedly about bed positioning and decorations. Weiss maintained her dignified distance, organizing her belongings with precision that bordered on ritualistic. Different as they were, all 3 possessed qualities Ben admired: RWBY's optimism and tactical creativity, Yang's confidence and protective instincts, Weiss's discipline and analytical mind. Maybe Ozpin knew what he was doing after all. Hey, Ben, RWBY called, interrupting his thoughts. Do aliens sleep? Like, when you're transformed, do you get tired? It depends on the species, Ben replied, sitting cross-legged on his bed. Some need almost no rest, others hibernate for days. Their metabolisms are all different. Fascinating, Weiss murmured, momentarily distracted from her unpacking. The physiological implications. Oh no, Yang groaned dramatically. You've activated her science mode. Weiss flushed slightly. I simply appreciate the biological complexity involved. It's okay to be curious, Ben said, offering her an encouraging smile. Most of what I know about the aliens comes from experience, not formal study. A scientific perspective might reveal things I've missed. Quote, this seemed to please Weiss, though she tried to hide it by returning to her unpacking. Perhaps we can incorporate some analysis into our dust research. RWBY flopped backward onto her bed. So what do you think Ozpin wants to talk about tomorrow? Special training sounds exciting. Probably protocols for Ben's transformations, Yang suggested, pulling a brush through her luxurious blonde hair. Can't have him going all crystal monster in the cafeteria. Diamond Head, Ben corrected automatically. And yeah, discretion is probably on the agenda. Along with the Vilgax situation. Weiss added, her expression sobering. Those modified Grimm during initiation weren't random encounters. The reminder cast a pall over the room. Ben looked down at the Omnitrix. Its green glow casting shadows across his face. Whoever, or whatever, is behind those modifications knows about the Omnitrix, he said quietly. And they're testing us, studying our responses. RWBY sat up, silver eyes serious. Then we'll just have to be better than they expect. Her simple confidence broke the tension, prompting small smiles from the others. Agreed, Weiss said with surprising solidarity. If this Vilgax entity thinks he can use Grimm to recover your device, he'll find Team RWBY more formidable than anticipated. Yeah, Yang pumped her fist. Nobody messes with my team and gets away with it. Ben felt an unexpected warmth at their unified support. Thanks, guys. Just be careful. Vilgax isn't like normal Grimm or human opponents. If he's anything like the version from my world, he's calculating, patient, and absolutely ruthless. Then it's good you're not facing him alone anymore, RWBY said firmly. As conversation drifted to lighter topics, classes, campus rumors, weapon modifications, Ben found himself contemplating RWBY's words. Not alone. Despite the Omnitrix's burden and the looming threat of Vilgax, for the first time in years, he felt the weight on his shoulders lighten fractionally. Team RWBY might be an unlikely combination, but perhaps that was exactly what the situation required. The dust laboratory beneath beacons. Main academic building hummed with energy, the air charged with microscopic particles that glimmered in the artificial light. Sterile workstations lined the walls, each equipped with specialized analysis tools and containment fields. Weiss moved through the space with confident familiarity, pulling on specially designed gloves as she lectured. Raw dust is inherently unstable. The slightest NDLING can trigger violent reactions depending on the type: fire, ice, lightning, and so on. Ben observed from a safe distance, the Omnitrix occasionally pulsing in apparent response to the ambient dust energy. So it's basically elemental energy in crystal form. A crude but not inaccurate summary, Weiss conceded, carefully extracting a vial of red dust from a secured cabinet. What makes Deuce T truly remarkable is its responsiveness to aura, to human will and intention. Like how your rapier channels different dust types for different effects, Ben noted. Weiss seemed pleased by his observation. Precisely. Mertenaster is designed to maximize dust efficiency through aura conductivity. The user's intention shapes the dust reaction. She placed the vial in a reinforced analysis chamber. What we need to determine is how dust interacts with your Omnitrix's energy signature. Professor Ozpin suggested they may be related technologies, despite originating in different worlds. Ben approached the chamber, extending his arms so the Omnitrix was positioned near the dust sample. Should we expect a reaction? Hard to predict, Weiss admitted. Which is why we're conducting this test. In a controlled environment with minimal quantities. As the Omnitrix drew near the chamber, both began to react, the red dust glowing more intensely, the Omnitrix pulsing with accelerated frequency. Fascinating, Weiss murmured, monitoring readings on a nearby screen. They're resonating at harmonically related frequencies. Almost like they recognize each other. Ben felt the Omnitrix warming against his skin. It's never done this with other energy sources before. Try activating it, Weiss suggested. Not to transform, just initiate the selection process. Ben complied, twisting the dial to bring up the holographic interface. The reaction intensified immediately. The dust sample began to rotate within its container while the Omnitrix's holographic display showed unusual stability. The alien silhouettes more clearly defined than normal. It's definitely responding, Ben confirmed. The interface feels sharper somehow. More precise. Weiss made rapid notes on her scroll, eyes bright with scientific curiosity. The energy patterns are remarkably similar at the quantum level. If I didn't know better, I'd say dust and your Omnitrix share a common technological ancestor. Which aligns with what Vilgax said about the Omnitrix being born here, Ben pointed out. But how? The Omnitrix was created by an alien named Azimuth from a planet called Galvan Prime, billions of light years from Earth in my dimension. Weiss considered this as she adjusted the analysis parameters. Perhaps there are connections between dimensions we don't yet understand. Parallel development, or even direct transfer of knowledge. Or maybe, Ben suggested slowly, Azimuth wasn't the original creator, just the one who perfected the technology. This possibility hung between them as they continued their analysis, moving through different dust types and observing the variations in response. Each exhibited unique resonance patterns with the Omnitrix, but all demonstrated clear affinity. Let's try something more practical, Weiss finally suggested, securing the samples and moving to a reinforced testing area. Transform into one of your alien forms while in proximity to activated dust. Ben selected Swampfire, a plant-based alien with regenerative capabilities and fire manipulation. As the transformation completed, Weiss activated a small quantity of fire dust from a safe distance. The results were immediate and dramatic. Swampfire's natural flames turned from orange to brilliant crimson, increasing in intensity and precision. He could feel the difference, like his Harem abilities had been amplified and refined. "This is incredible," Swampfire said, his normally raspy voice clearer and more resonant. "It's like the dust is enhancing my natural fire manipulation." Weiss circled him with analytical interest, scroll recording every detail. "The dust appears to be integrating with your transformed biology, enhancing compatible abilities." They repeated the experiment with different combinations. Ice dust with Big Chill, lightning dust with Shock Squatch, gravity dust with Gravitack, each demonstrating similar enhancement effects. The implications are significant, Weiss concluded as Ben returned to human form after the final test. With proper application, dust could potentially expand your transformation's capabilities beyond their baseline parameters. Or it could explain how Vilgax is controlling and enhancing Grimm, Ben pointed out. If he's found a way to merge Omnitrix technology with dust, he could essentially create programmable Grimm with adaptive abilities. Weiss's expression sobered, a concerning prospect. "We should report our findings to Professor Ozpin immediately." As they packed up their equipment and prepared to leave, an alarm blared through the laboratory, not the standard Grimm warning, but a different pattern signaling a security breach. "What's happening?" Ben asked, already activating the Omnitrix. The laboratory doors slid open automatically as emergency protocols engaged. Professor Goodwich's voice came over the intercom. "All students return to dormitories immediately. Security breach in the East Quadrant." "This is not a drill." Ben and Weiss exchanged glances. "East Quadrant," Weiss said. "That's where the CCT tower and primary dust repository are located." "Someone's after the dust," Ben realized. "Or trying to disable communications. Or both," Weiss added grimly. Ben selected an alien form. "We should check it out." Professor Goodwich ordered all students to their dormitories, Weiss reminded him. Though she made no move toward the exit. "And if it's Vilgax or his agents, the professors might not be prepared for what they're facing," Ben countered. "Besides, technically I'm a team leader now. That comes with some discretionary authority, right?" Weiss rolled her eyes. "That is not how the academy hierarchy works, and you know it." "So you're saying we should go back to the dorm?" She sighed, drawing Mertonaster. "I'm saying your reasoning is flawed. But your conclusion is correct. We should investigate." Ben grinned. "That's the spirit, Schnee." He slammed down on the Omnitrix, transforming into XLR-8, the velociraptor-like speedster. "Climb on my back, I can get us there in seconds." Weiss hesitated only momentarily before mounting the alien's back with surprising dignity for someone essentially piggybacking on a dinosaur. "If you tell anyone about this arrangement, I will freeze you solid in your sleep." "Noted," XLR-8 replied, amusement evident in his mechanically filtered voice. They shot from the laboratory at blinding speed, the world blurring around them as XLR-8 navigated the academy halls with precision born of enhanced reflexes. Within moments, they reached the East Quadrant, where chaos reigned. Security drones lay shattered across the courtyard. A section of the CCT tower's ground floor had been breached, the reinforced wall crumpled inward as if hit by tremendous force. Academy staff maintained a perimeter while Professor Goodwich directed emergency responses. XLR-8 deposited Weiss behind a decorative hedge, then reverted to Ben in a flash of red light. They peered over the foliage, assessing the situation. No signs of Grimm, Weiss noted. This appears to be a targeted infiltration rather than an attack. Which means someone inside, Ben concluded. The question is who and why. A flicker of movement at the tower's upper levels caught his attention, a shadowy figure leaping between maintenance platforms with inhuman agility. There, he pointed. 10th floor, east side. Weiss squinted. I can barely. Wait, I see it. We need to get up there. Without being spotted by Goodwitch, Ben added. She definitely won't approve of students engaging an intruder. Weiss considered their options. The maintenance shaft. It runs external to the main tower and provides access to all levels for repair crews. Lead the way, Ben said, impressed by her knowledge of the academy's infrastructure. They skirted the security perimeter, using the confusion to slip unnoticed to a small access door partially concealed by ornamental shrubbery. Weiss produced her scroll, bypassing the simple lock with a student override. Should I ask how you know about this? Ben whispered as they entered the narrow maintenance shaft. Quote, I memorized Beacon's structural schematics before arriving, Weiss replied matter-of-factly. Knowledge is preparation, preparation is success. Right, Ben muttered. Totally normal pre-school research. The shaft was dimly lit by emergency strips, barely wide enough for two people to climb side by side. Metal rungs embedded in the wall formed a ladder that stretched upward into shadow. 10th floor, Ben said, activating the Omnitrix. That's a lot of climbing. He transformed into a small, amphibian-like alien with adhesive hands and feet, gray matter, one of his most intelligent but physically weakest forms. Weiss stared at the 6-inch-tall creature. How exactly is that going to help? Gray matter's disproportionately large eyes blinked up at her. This form has enhanced intelligence and problem-solving capabilities. Also, he leapt to the wall, tiny hands and feet adhering instantly to the surface. I can climb without the ladder, which is faster and less noisy. And what about me? Weiss asked, crossing her arms. Gray matter assessed the shaft, calculating variables with his enhanced intellect. Your glyphs. You could create an ascending platform system and essentially levitate upward. Weiss considered this, then nodded. Efficient, if dust-intensive. She created her first glyph platform, stepping onto the glowing white circle that hovered in the air. RWBY matter began his ascent alongside her, scampering up the wall with surprising speed for his diminutive size. So, he ventured as they passed the 4th floor, schematics memorization aside, you seem remarkably well informed about Beacon's security systems. My father insisted, Weiss replied, creating another glyph as she stepped up. The Schnee heiress must never be at an informational disadvantage. Gray matter noted the subtle shift in her tone, a hint of bitterness beneath the practiced poise. Heavy expectations. You have no idea, she said quietly. Try me, Gray matter offered. My dad wanted me to follow him into the plumbing business. Imagine his disappointment when his son became an intergalactic superhero instead. To his surprise, Weiss laughed, a genuine sound quickly stifled. That's hardly comparable. Quote, true, Gray matter conceded. Plumbing is a much more stable career choice. Benefits, retirement plan, minimal alien warlord encounters. Another small laugh escaped her control. You're ridiculous, and you're not as icy as you pretend to be, Gray matter observed shrewdly. Weiss's expression closed again, professional mask sliding back into place. We're approaching the 10th floor. Focus on the mission. Gray matter sighed internally. 1 step forward, 2 steps back with Weiss Schnee. They reached the 10th floor access hatch, pausing to listen for movement beyond. Hearing nothing, Gray matter examined the locking mechanism with his enhanced perception. Simple mechanical tumbler system, he observed. No electronic security on internal access points. Can you open it? Weiss whispered. Gray matter's tiny fingers manipulated the lock components with surgical precision. Child's play. For this form, at least. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Weiss created a final glyph that positioned her directly before the hatch, rapier ready as Gray matter pushed it open. The 10th floor consisted primarily of communication equipment, servers, transmitters, and data storage arrays that maintained Beacon's connection to the cross-continental transmit network. The space was dark save for the blinking status lights of various machines. Gray matter scurried through first, his small size making him nearly invisible in the shadows. Weiss followed silently, closing the hatch behind them. There, gray matter whispered, pointing toward the main server bank. A figure crouched before the central control terminal, fingers dancing across holographic interfaces as data streamed by at impossible speeds. They wore form-fitting black armor with glowing circuit-like patterns that pulsed with the same sickly green energy they'd observed in the modified Grim crystals. Not Vilgax, gray matter murmured. Someone else. Weiss readied a glyph, preparing to immobilize the intruder. Gray matter calculated trajectories and scenarios, formulating a capture plan. Before either could act, the figure spoke without turning. I can hear you breathing, you know. Enhanced auditory perception. One of the perks. The voice was male, young, with an edge of sardonic amusement that gray matter found disturbingly familiar. Step out where I can see you, the figure continued. Still focused on his work. Don't. Doesn't matter to me either way. Gray matter signaled Weiss to hold position while he scampered closer, using server equipment for cover. The Omnitrix symbol on his back began flashing, timeout imminent. Perfect timing, he muttered sarcastically. Red light engulfed him, and Ben found himself crouched awkwardly behind DA's server unit significantly too small to hide his human form. The intruder chuckled. Transformation reversion. That confirms it. He finally turned, revealing a face half covered by a technological mask. Hello, Ben Tennyson. I've been looking forward to meeting this world's version of you. Ben straightened, emerging from cover. You have me at a disadvantage. Story of your life, the intruder replied, tapping a command that locked the data extraction in progress. Always a step behind, always reacting instead of acting. Something about his mannerisms struck Ben as hauntingly familiar. Do I know you? In another life, another world. The intruder removed his mask, revealing a face that sent shock through Ben's system. The name's Kevin Levin. Ring any bells? Ben stared at T. He near-identical version of his former enemy and eventual ally from his home dimension. Kevin. How? Parallel dimensions, parallel lives, Kevin shrugged. Though in this world, I found a different path to power. He held up his hand, revealing circuitry embedded in his palm that glowed with Omnitrix-like energy. And different toys to play with. Weiss chose that moment to strike, launchy. Ing a precision ice attack that should have immobilized Kevin instantly. Instead, he simply raised his hand, absorbing the dust energy into his circuitry. Schnee Eris, Kevin acknowledged with a mocking bow. Your family's dust is particularly potent. Makes for excellent fuel. Weiss moved to Ben's side, rapier still ready. You know him. Version of him, Ben replied, not taking his eyes off Kevin. In my world, he's complicated. Started as an enemy, became an ally. Eventually a friend. Kevin laughed. How touching. Unfortunately, this world's Kevin has different priorities. He gestured to the data extraction in progress. Like the research your Professor Ozpin has been hiding about the origins of both dust and the Omnitrix. Ben tensed. What are you talking about? You still don't get it, do you? Kevin's expression turned serious. The Omnitrix wasn't created by some alien genius in another dimension. It was born here, on Remnant, thousands of years ago. Azimuth simply found it, studied it, replicated it. Your grandfather brought you here because he discovered the truth. The Omnitrix is trying to come home. The claim hung in the air, simultaneously outlandish and disturbing in how it aligned with their recent discoveries. Why should we believe you? Weiss demanded. Kevin smiled without warmth. You shouldn't, but you should believe the data I'm extracting from Beacon's secure archives. He tapped his temple. Vilgax wants the Omnitrix. I want to understand it. Different goals, temporary alliance. Ben activated the Omnitrix again, cycling through available transformations. Whatever game you're playing, it ends now. Does it? Kevin raised an eyebrow. You might want to check the basement levels first. While you've been chasing me, my diversion has been quite productive. A distant explosion shook the tower, followed by alarms blaring throughout the structure. The dust repository, Weiss realized with horror. This was just a distraction. Kevin applauded slowly. Quick on the uptake, Schnee. Yes, the real prize is below. Raw, unprocessed dust from the Academy's restricted collection. Dust with properties your family keeps very, very quiet. Another explosion, more violent than the first, rocked the building. Kevin casually disconnected from the terminal, the data extraction complete. Time for me to go, he announced. Tell Ozpin that Vilgax sends his regards. And Ben. His expression darkened. The Omnitrix is killing you. Slowly, cell by cell. Ask your grandfather about that sometime. With that ominous statement, Kevin slammed his palm against a wall panel. Energy coursed from his circuitry into the building systems, overloading them in a cascade of sparks and smoke. By the time the emergency ventilation cleared the air, he had vanished. Ben and Weiss exchanged grim looks. The repository, Ben said urgently. We need to get down there. Weiss nodded, already creating a glyph platform at the maintenance hatch. Fastest route is straight down the shaft. Ben transformed into Big Chill, his moth-like form materializing in a flash of green. I'll fly ahead. Follow as quickly as you can. Without waiting for her response, he phased through the floor, becoming intangible as he descended through multiple levels of the tower. The dust repository occupied a reinforced vault beneath the building's foundadio. A location specifically designed to contain catastrophic dust reactions. As Big Chill approached the lower levels, he felt the air temperature rising dramatically, unusual for the climate-controlled facility. Phasing through the final ceiling, he emerged into a scene of devastation. The vault door had been torn from its hinges by tremendous force. Beyond the threshold, the repository itself was in chaos, storage units shattered. Dust crystals scattered across the floor, pulsing with unstable energy. At the center of the destruction stood a figure that made Big Chill's ectoplasmic blood run cold. Taller than any human, with crimson skin and tentacle-like facial appendages, clad in armor that incorporated both alien technology and dust crystals, Vilgax, almost identical to the version Big Chill had fought in his home dimension. Yet somehow merged with Grim-like attributes. Black ichor ran through visible veins, and his eyes glowed with the distinctive red of Grim rather than his usual yellow. Tennyson. The hybrid monstrosity rumbled, voice echoing with unnatural harmonics. Right on schedule. Big Chill hovered cautiously, assessing the situation. Several security drones lay shattered around the vault, along with 2 unconscious, or worse, security personnel. Vilgax, he acknowledged. New look. Can't say it's an improvement. The grim Vilgax hybrid laughed, the sound like grinding stone. Always the jester, even when outmatched. Some things remain constant across all realities. He held up a container filled with pulsating dust crystals unlike any Big Chill had seen, neither processed nor raw. But something in between, with a peculiar internal structure visible even from a distance. Proto-dust, Vilgax explained, noting Big Chill's interest. The original form, before human refinement. The same substance used to create the first Omnitrix on this world, millennia ago. If you're expecting me to believe that, Big Chill began. Your belief is irrelevant, Vilgax interrupted. The Omnitrix knows the truth. It has been calling to its source since you arrived on Remnant. Haven't you noticed its increased instability? Its new transformations? It's trying to evolve, to return to its original purpose. Big Chill remained silent, unwilling to acknowledge how the claims aligned with his own experiences. What purpose? He finally asked. Vilgax's grim red eyes gleamed. To merge humanity with Grim. To end the eternal war by creating a perfect hybrid species. The claim was so outlandish that Big Chill almost laughed. Now I know you're lying. The Omnitrix is a preservation tool, designed to maintain genetic diversity. Is that what Azimuth told you? Vilgax countered. A convenient fiction to hide the truth, that he discovered the device here, on Remnant. And repurposed it for his own agenda. Before Big Chill could respond, a familiar voice called from the ruined entrance. Step away from the proto-dust, Vilgax. Weiss stood in the doorway. Mertenaster directed at the grim alien hybrid, a complex glyph forming beneath her feet. Vilgax regarded her with amused contempt. A Shni, how appropriate. Your ancestors were among those who sought to destroy the original Omnitrix, fearing its power to unite what they wished to keep divided. Weiss's expression betrayed momentary confusion before hardening into resolve. Whatever history you're fabricating, it won't distract us. History is written by victors, Vilgax replied, and rewritten by those with secrets to keep. He placed the proto-dust container into a compartment in his armor. I have what I came for. We will meet again, Tennyson, when the time comes to reclaim what is rightfully mine. Big Chill moved to intercept, exhaling a freezing vapor intended to immobilize the intruder. Vilgax countered with a blast of energy from his gauntlet, not the usual destructive beam, but a pulse that somehow interfered with Big Chill's molecular cohesion. The moth-like alien felt his intangibility falter, his form becoming partially solid against his will. Weiss launched her attack simultaneously, a barrage of dust-enhanced ice projectiles that should have pierced even Vilgax's formidable armor. Instead, they were absorbed into the crystal formations embedded in his exoskeleton, fueling rather than harming him. Predictable, Vilgax commented, but educational. He slammed his fist into the ground, creating a shockwave that momentarily destabilized both Big Chill and Weiss. In that instant of distraction, Vilgax activated some form of teleportation device. The typical alien technology Ben was familiar with, but something that seemed to tear a hole in reality itself, edges writhing with shadowy tendrils reminiscent of grim essence. Ask Ozpin about the Omnitrix's origins. Vilgax's voice echoed as he stepped into the portal. Ask what really happened to the civilization that created it. Ask why the Grimm have hunted humanity for thousands of years. The portal collapsed behind him, leaving Big Chill and Weiss in the devastated repository with more questions than answers. The Omnitrix symbol on Big Chill's chest began flashing red. Moments later, Ben stood in the alien's place, looking troubled. He's lying, Weiss said immediately, moving to his side. Trying to create doubt, to divide us. Ben nodded, but uncertainty lingered in his expression. Classic Vilgax tactics. But some of it aligns too well with what we've been discovering, Ben admitted. The Omnitrix's response to dust, the new transformations, the instability. And Ozpin has been selective with information from the beginning. Weiss considered this, analytical mind processing the implications. We should report what happened, but reserve judgment until we have more facts. Agreed, Ben said, relieved by her rational approach. And we need to tell RWBY and Yang. If we're being targeted specifically, the whole team needs to be prepared. As they surveyed the destruction, cataloging what they could determine had been stolen, Ben felt the Omnitrix pulse against his wrist. Not the familiar rhythm he'd grown accustomed to over 7 years, but something new. Something responding to its environment in ways he didn't fully understand. What are you? He whispered to the device when Weiss's attention was elsewhere. And what were you meant to do? The Omnitrix offered no answers, only a gentle green glow that reflected in his troubled eyes. The team dormitory was silent save for the rhythmic tapping of Weiss's scroll stylus against the desk. RWBY and Yang sat on their respective beds, expressions somber as they processed the information Ben and Weiss had shared. So this Vilgax guy is basically claiming the Omnitrix is actually from Remnant, not Ben's world. Yang summarized, and it was originally designed to merge humans with Grimm. That's his claim, Ben confirmed, pacing restlessly. Along with some vague accusations about the Schnee family being involved in its history. Weiss looked up from her scroll. Which is absurd. The Schnee Dust Company has only existed for 3 generations. If the Omnitrix truly dates back thousands of years, any connection to my family is impossible. Unless he meant the early dust traders who eventually became the Schnee line, RWBY suggested, surprisingly insightful. Lee histories go back way further than companies. Weiss fell silent, considering this possibility. The real question, Yang continued, is why tell you all this? Bad guys don't usually share their evil backstory unless they're trying to manipulate you. Exactly, Ben agreed. Classic divide and conquer strategy. Plant seeds of doubt about Ozpin, about the Omnitrix's purpose, about our allies. RWBY hugged her knees to her chest. But what if some of it is true? Not the evil parts, but the origin. What if the Omnitrix really was created on Remnant? The question hung heavy in the air. Then we need to discover the truth. Weiss said decisively, setting down her scroll. Through research and investigation, not by taking the word of someone who's clearly our enemy. Ben stopped pacing, coming to a decision. We start with the protodust. Vilgax said it was the key to the Omnitrix's creation. If we can analyze its properties, compare them to the Omnitrix's energy signature, we might confirm or refute his claims. Weiss finished, nodding in agreement. Unfortunately, the stolen samples were the only ones Beacon possessed. But not the only ones that exist, Yang pointed out. If it's a special form of dust, wouldn't the Schnee Company have samples? All eyes turned to Weiss, who shifted uncomfortably. Possibly. My father keeps certain, unique specimens in the family vault. If proto-dust exists, that's where it would be. Could you access it? Ben asked. Or at least information about it. Weiss hesitated, internal conflict evident in her expression. Technically, I have clearance. But requesting access to restricted samples would alert my father to my interest. He would ask questions. The unspoken implication was clear. Jacques Schnee would not approve of his daughter investigating corporate secrets for academy research. What about winter break? RWBY suggested. We'll all be going home for a few weeks. You could check then, right? Perhaps, Weiss conceded. Though my movements at home are monitored. Something in her tone made Ben pause, looking at her more closely. The rigid posture, the careful word choice, signs of someone accustomed to scrutiny and constraint. Until then, he said, changing the subject, we focus on what we can control. Training, classes, and understanding how the Omnitrix interacts with standard dust types. Yang stretched, deliberately lightening the mood. So basically, school is normal, but with extra secret alien tech research on the side. Cool. RWBY bounced up from her bed, characteristic enthusiasm returning. We should have a team name for the research. Operation Omni Dust. We are not naming our investigation, Weiss said firmly. Operation Diamond Dust. RWBY continued undeterred. No. The Dust Busters. Absolutely not. As RWBY continued suggesting increasingly ridiculous operation names, with Yang enthusiastically joining in, Ben caught Weiss's eye across the room. Despite her exasperated expression, there was a softness there, a subtle relaxing of her perpetual guard. In that moment, Ben realized something important about his partner and teammate. Beneath the exterior and rigid perfectionism lay someone who desperately wanted connection but didn't know how to reach for it. Thank you, he said quietly when RWBY and Yang's attention was diverted by a particularly heated debate about whether Dusty Business was a viable operation name. Weiss blinked in surprise. For what? For believing me, for helping with the research, for being willing to potentially go against your family to uncover the truth. She looked away, uncomfortable with the acknowledgement. It's the logical course of action. Still, Ben pressed gently. I know what it's like to carry expectations. To wonder if you're doing the right thing or just what others want. Weiss was quiet for so long Ben thought she wouldn't respond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. Sometimes I'm not sure where the difference lies anymore. The vulnerability in that simple admission affected Ben more deeply than he expected. Before he could respond, RWBY's excited voice broke the moment. Team RWBY's super secret alien dust research squad. That's the one. Yang groaned theatrically. Way too long, sis. Just RWBY research would suffice, Weiss suggested, professional mask firmly back in place. As their teammates continued their good-natured argument, Ben found himself studying Weiss with new understanding. They were more alike than he'd initially realized, both carrying burdens of expectation and responsibility, both struggling to define themselves against the identities others imposed. Perhaps that was why Ozpin had paired them as partners. Not because of complementary combat styles or academic strengths, but because each could help the other find balance between duty and self-determination. The Omnitrix pulsed gently against his wrist, its green glow reflecting in Weiss's ice-blue eyes as she glanced his way. For a brief moment, understanding passed between them, an acknowledgement of shared struggle, of reluctant trust beginning to form. Whatever the truth about the Omnitrix's origins, whatever Vilgax's ultimate plan, Ben knew one thing with certainty: Team RWBY would face it together. And perhaps, in the process, they would each discover truths about themselves as well. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Blood and Magic. Morning sunlight dappled the training arena floor as Ben faced RWBY across the combat circle, his fingers hovering near the Omnitrix. 2 weeks had passed since the repository break-in, and Team RWBY had fallen into an intense training regimen, preparing for threats they could only partially anticipate. Remember, Ben called to his opponent. No holding back. RWBY's silver eyes narrowed with determination as she unfurled Crescent Rose to its full scythe configuration. Wouldn't dream of it. From the sidelines, Yang leaned forward eagerly. My leans on RWBY. Your familial bias is showing, Weiss replied without looking up from her scroll, where she documented each training session with meticulous detail. 3, 2, 1, begin. Yang shouted. RWBY vanished in a blur of rose petals, her semblance carrying her across the arena faster than untrained eyes could follow. Ben had anticipated this opening move, however, and activated the Omnitrix in the same instant, selecting a transformation with practiced efficiency. Green light engulfed him as RWBY converged on his position, her scythe whisk through the air, only to pass through empty space as the light faded to reveal a ghostly, blue-cloaked figure that had turned intangible at the perfect moment. Big Chill, the moth-like alien announced unnecessarily, his raspy voice echoing with otherworldly harmonics. RWBY pivoted instantly, firing Crescent Rose to propel herself in a new attack vector. Going intangible is cheating, is it? Big Chill queried, becoming solid just long enough to exhale a freezing vapor that crystallized the floor in RWBY's path. The younger girl adapted with impressive agility, using her scythe as an anchor to change direction mid-slide. Then firing again to launch herself skyward. From this aerial vantage, she rained precision shots that Big Chill was forced to dodge despite his intangibility. Dust-infused ammunition being one of the few things that could affect him in that state. The practice match continued with escalating intensity, RWBY's speed and adaptability against Big Chill's phasing abilities and ice powers. Neither gained a decisive advantage, their movements becoming an intricate dance of attack and counter, strategy and adaptation. They've improved, a new voice observed from beside Weiss. Professor Ozpin stood at the arena's edge, coffee mug in hand, watching the match with analytical interest. Weiss straightened immediately, switching her scroll to a more formal documentation template. Professor, she acknowledged. Yes, we've been implementing structured training rotations to maximize our combat versatility. So I see. Ozpin sipped his coffee. And Mr. Tennyson's transformations. Any further instability? Weiss hesitated before answering, conscious of the professor's selective information sharing. Minor fluctuations, primarily when in proximity to concentrated dust. Nothing that has impaired combat effectiveness. Ozpin nodded, seemingly satisfied with this partial truth. They both knew Ben had experienced several concerning incidents, transformations ending prematurely. Alien forms displaying unexpected variations in their abilities, but Weiss had become protective of such details following Vilgax's allegations. In the arena, the match had its conclusion as RWBY executed a dazzling maneuver, using her semblance to split into 3 separate petal streams that converged on Big Chill from different angles simultaneously. Unable to phase through all 3, he was caught by one and slammed into the wall with enough force to trigger the arena's aura monitoring system. Match point. RWBY rose. Yang cheered as the buzzer sounded. Big Chill picked himself up, a grin visible on his alien features despite the defeat. New trick with the petal splitting. Impressive. Red light engulfed him as the Omnitrix timed out, leaving Ben standing in his place. Looking slightly winded but pleased with the session. Been practicing, RWBY admitted, collapsing Crescent Rose into its compact form. Figured I needed something to counter your intangibility. Well, it worked, Ben conceded, offering a fist bump that RWBY enthusiastically returned. Ozpin cleared his throat, drawing their attention. An excellent demonstration of adaptive tactics, Miss Rose. Mr. Tennyson, your restraint with your more destructive transformations in a training environment shows commendable judgment. Thanks, Professor, Ben replied, instantly alert to the headmaster's unexpected presence. Just working on team coordination. Indeed. Ozpin's gaze swept over the assembled students. While I hate to interrupt your training, there's a matter requiring Team RWBY's attention. A new transfer student has arrived from Haven Academy with special circumstances similar to your own, Mr. Tennyson. Ben's eyebrows rose. Similar circumstances. P.S. It would be best if you met her yourself, Ozpin suggested, turning toward the arena entrance where Professor Goodwitch had appeared, accompanied by a young woman with shoulder-length auburn hair and intelligent green eyes. Ben's jaw dropped in shock. Gwen. The newcomer offered a small, knowing smile. Hello, doofus. Surprise. The casual insult, delivered with affectionate familiarity, removed any doubt. Ben crossed the arena in rapid strides, sweeping his cousin into a tight embrace that lifted her off her feet. What? How? He sputtered as he set her down. You're supposed to be with Grandpa Max. Change of plans, Gwen replied, smoothing her Haven Academy uniform. When you started having Omnitrix issues, Grandpa thought you might need backup. Her expression turned serious. Plus, something's happening with my powers. Something connected to this world. Ozpin interjected smoothly. Miss Tennyson possesses unique abilities that align with our research into the Dust Omnitrix connection. I've arranged for her transfer to Beacon, where she'll join second-year courses but assist with Team RWBY's special projects. The rest of the team had approached during this exchange, regarding the newcomer with various degrees of curiosity. RWBY practically vibrated with excitement at meeting someone connected to Ben's mysterious past. You must be RWBY, Gwen said, offering her hand to the younger girl. Ben's messages mentioned your weapon innovations. I'd love to hear about your design process. RWBY beamed, instantly won over. You would. I mean, yes, I have diagrams and everything. Gwen turned to Weiss, her posture subtly adjusting to match the heiress's formal bearing. Weiss Schnee. Your reputation precedes you. I understand you've been instrumental in the dust research component. Weiss's eyebrow arched slightly, impressed despite herself by the newcomer's diplomatic approach. I've contributed my family's expertise, yes. And you're young, Gwen concluded, addressing the blonde. The team powerhouse. Your fighting style sounds fascinating. Yang grinned. Oh, I like her already. Smart and observant. Professor Goodwich consulted her scroll with practiced efficiency. Miss Tennyson's belongings have been placed in the single dormitory adjacent to Team RWBY's quarters. As a transfer student with special research status, she has been assigned individual accommodation rather than team integration. How convenient, Weiss murmured, just quietly enough that only Ben caught the subtle skepticism in her tone. Ozpin sipped his coffee, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrents. I suggest you take the remainder of the day to help Miss Tennyson acclimate to Beacon. Classes will resume tomorrow. He paused, eyes settling on Ben with unreadable intent. Family reunions are precious opportunities, Mr. Tennyson. I recommend making the most of this one. With that cryptic suggestion, Ozpin departed, Professor Goodwich following after Pravi. Ding Gwen with her schedule and security credentials. Once the faculty were gone, Ben turned to his cousin with burning questions. Okay, what's really going on? Grandpa Max wouldn't send you unless something serious was happening. Gwen glanced meaningfully around the public arena. Not here, somewhere private. Our dorm, RWBY suggested, already gathering her training gear. No one will interrupt us there. As they made their way across campus, Ben found himself repeatedly glancing at Gwen, still processing her unexpected arrival. They had been inseparable as children, reluctant compani. Ons turned best friends during that fateful summer when the Omnitrix first bonded with him. Years of shared battles and secrets had forged a connection deeper than ordinary cousins. Yet something was different about her now. A gravity to her movements, a subtle glow to her skin that hadn't been present before their arrival on Remnant. Whatever changes the Omnitrix was undergoing, Gwen was experiencing something parallel. The dormitory door had barely closed behind them when Ben's patience evaporated. All right, we're alone. What's happening, Gwen? She sat on RWBY's offered bed, composed yet somehow vulnerable. It started about a month after we arrived on Remnant. My magic began evolving, changing in ways I can't fully control. Yang frowned in confusion. Magic? I thought your thing was alien transformations. That's Ben, Gwen clarified. I have had what we called magic in our world. Energy manipulation, shields, tracking spells. Here, you'd probably call it a semblance. Except semblances don't typically evolve without specific catalysts, Weiss noted, academic interest overriding her initial skepticism. And they're unique to each individual, tied to their aura and personality. Gwen nodded. Exactly. But here, when I try to access my powers. She extended her hand, palm upward, and concentrated. Instead of the pink-purple energy that Ben remembered, her palm filled with swirling light that cycled through various dust colors, red, blue, white, yellow, before settling into a peculiar magenta shade unlike any dust they'd seen. It's responding to this world's energy system, she explained. Integrating with it, enhancing it. Grandpa Max calls it mana. Now, a fusion of my natural abilities with Remnant's dust properties. RWBY leaned closer, silver eyes wide with fascination. That's so cool. Can you still do all your old magic stuff? And more, Gwen confirmed. But with less stability, less predictability. Like Ben's Omnitrix malfunctions, but with my entire power set. Ben paced the room, processing implications. So both the Omnitrix and your powers are adapting to Remnant. That supports the theory that there's some fundamental connection between our abilities and this world's energy systems. Which aligns with Vilgax's claims, Weiss added cautiously. Gwen's expression sharpened. Vilgax. He's here. Ben quickly summarized their encounters, the modified Grimm. Kevin's appearance, the proto-dust theft, and Vilgax's assertions about the Omnitrix's remnant origins. Gwen listened with growing concern, the magenta energy swirling more intensely around her fingers. That explains why Grandpa Max sent me with this, she said, retrieving a small data crystal from her pocket. Family records dating back centuries, including the first documented appearance of the Omnitrix in our dimension. The crystal pulsed with internal light as she placed it on Weiss's desk. Unlike standard dust formations, its structure appeared multi-dimensional. Facets revealing different contents depending on the viewing angle. A quantum storage medium, Weiss identified, professional interest overtaking caution. Theoretical in commercial applications, but my father's R&D division has prototypes. Grandpa Max has connections, Gwen said simply. It contains records that never made it into official Plumber archives. Plumbers? Yang questioned. Intergalactic peacekeepers, Ben explained. Our grandfather was one in our dimension. Here, he's adapted the role to Remnant's threat profile. RWBY bounced with barely contained curiosity. So what's on it? Secret alien stuff, Omnitrix blueprints, family recipes. Despite the tension, Gwen smiled. Some of each, actually. But most importantly, documentation of an archaeological expedition from 30 years ago, on Remnant. In the Vacuo Desert region, where Azimuth supposedly discovered the first Omnitrix components. Silence fell as the implications sank in. If true, this would confirm part of Vilgax's narrative, that the Omnitrix had indeed originated on Remnant, not in another dimension as Ben had always believed. Can we access the data? Weiss asked, examining the crystal without touching it. Gwen shook her head. Not without specialized equipment. Grandpa Max is bringing a reader device when he visits next week for the Vital Festival preparations. Convenient timing, Yang observed. Almost like events are being orchestrated. The observation hung heavy in the air, voicing what they'd all sensed, that forces beyond their understanding were manipulating circumstances. Bringing key players together for some unseen purpose. Ben finally broke the silence. Until we can access those records, we focus on what we can control. Gwen, we need to understand how your man interacts with the Omnitrix and with standard dust. Maybe there's a connection that explains the adaptations both are undergoing. Agreed, Gwen said. I've already set up lab time in the Advanced Dust Research Facility. Professor Goodwich was surprisingly accommodating. Almost suspiciously so, Weiss murmured. RWBY clapped her hands decisively. Research tomorrow. Today is for team bonding. Gwen needs the official beacon tour. And I need to show her all the best cookie spots in the cafeteria. Yang laughed. Always thinking with your stomach, sis. What? RWBY defended. Important tactical information. The levity broke the tension, and as the team prepared to show Gwen around campus, Ben found himself observing his cousin with renewed attention. The subtle changes in her bearing. The confident way she interacted with his teammates, the deeper resonance of her power. Remnant was changing her, just as it was changing the Omnitrix. The question was whether these transformations were random adaptations or part of some larger design. And why, despite years of familial closeness, he suddenly felt a strange new awareness of her as something more than just his cousin and childhood friend. Beacon's advanced dust laboratory hummed with sophisticated equipment as Gwen manipulated a sphere of pure mana between her palms, its magenta light casting otherworldly shadows across the sterile white surfaces. Monitoring instruments recorded every fluctuation in energy output, temperature, and dimensional stability. Remarkable, Weiss murmured, studying the real-time data on her scroll. It exhibits properties of all known dust types simultaneously, yet remains coherent without crystalline structure. Ben watched from a safe distance, the Omnitrix occasionally pulsing. In apparent response to Gwen's display. It's different from your old powers. More substantial somehow. Less conceptual. More material, Gwen agreed, compressing the energy sphere until it condensed into a glowing crystal that hovered above her palm. In our world, my powers manipulated abstract magical energy. Here, they interact with Remnant's physical energy system, dust. Creating a hybrid form, Weiss concluded. Fascinating theoretical implications. Energy that exists between states. RWBY, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the demonstration, suddenly perked up. Could you infuse weapons with it? Like, instead of standard dust rounds? Gwen considered this with scholarly interest. Theoretically, though the stability concerns would be significant. Unlike refined dust, mana responds to my conscious control. Without that guidance, boom, Yang supplied helpfully, making an explosive gesture with her hands. Precisely, Gwen confirmed, though with proper containment. We're getting sidetracked, Ben interrupted, tapping the Omnitrix. We need to understand how your mana interacts with this, not design new ammunition types. Weiss nodded in agreement. The priority is determining correlation between the Omnitrix's adaptations and Gwen's evolving abilities. If both are responding to Remnant's energy systems in parallel ways, it supports the theory of common technological ancestry. Quote, Gwen dismissed the crystal, allowing the mana to dissipate into ambient energy. Let's start simple. Ben, transform into something with energy manipulation capabilities. Chromastone or feedback would be ideal. Ben nodded, activating the Omnitrix and cycling through available transformations. He selected feedback. A black and green alien with plugs on his fingertips, tail, and antennae. Capable of absorbing and redirecting energy. Green light engulfed him, but when it faded, collective gasps filled the laboratory. Instead of feedback, Ben had become a being they'd never seen before. Humanoid but composed of swirling magenta energy contained within black armor pieces, similar to Gwen's mana but structured differently. That's not feedback, the transformed Ben observed. His voice resonating with harmonic overtones. Omnitrix malfunction, Yang suggested, taking an instinctive step back. Gwen approached cautiously, her own mana responding to the transformation by flowing toward the new alien-like metal to a magnet. I don't think so. This feels familiar somehow. Weiss was already documenting the unexpected development, cameras capturing every detail. The energy signature matches Gwen's mana almost exactly, but with distinct modulation patterns. The transformed Ben examined his hands, watching energy swirl beneath the surface. I can feel everything. The dust in storage, the electrical systems, Gwen's mana, it's all connected. Try manipulating it, Gwen suggested, generating a small mana sphere. See if you can interact with this. Ben extended his hand toward the sphere. Instantly, a connection formed between them, a bridge of energy that neither had consciously created. The sphere expanded, contracted, then transformed into complex geometric patterns that rotated in the air between them. I'm not doing that, Gwen whispered, both alarmed and fascinated. Neither am I, Ben replied. At least, not intentionally. The energy construct continued evolving, forming symbols that hovered momentarily before dissolving back into formless light. Some resembled ancient glyphs they'd seen in remnant historical texts. Others appeared completely alien. It's like they're communicating, RWBY observed with surprising insight. The two energy types talking to each other. Weiss was capturing everything, her scientific curiosity overriding caution. Try directing it towards something. See if you can manifest physical effects. Ben concentrated on a metal cylinder on the nearby workbench. The energy responded immediately, flowing from his hand to envelop the object. Instead of manipulating it externally as telekinesis would, the energy seemed to transform the metal itself, rearranging its atomic structure. Until the cylinder had become a perfect crystal replica, glowing with internal light. Okay, that's new, Yang commented, wide-eyed. And slightly terrifying. The Omnitrix symbol, prominently displayed on the alien's chest, began flashing red. the standard warning before timeout. Moments later, Ben returned to human form, looking slightly disoriented. "What was that?" he asked, steadying himself against a workbench. "I didn't select that transformation." Gwen retrieved the crystallized cylinder, examining it with professional interest. "The Omnitrix appears to have scanned my mana and created a compatible transformation. Essentially, it gave you access to my evolved abilities." "That shouldn't be possible," Ben objected. "The Omnitrix transforms me into different species, not different power sets from the same species." "Unless," Weiss interjected thoughtfully, "Gwen's mana represents a fundamental change at the genetic level. The Omnitrix may be registering her as a new subspecies." The implications hung heavy in the air. That remnant was changing Gwen at the most fundamental level, transforming her into something beyond ordinary human. "We need to name it," RWBY declared, breaking the tension. "All your aliens have names, right?" Ben blinked, momentarily derailed by the practical question. Right. Usually based on their abilities or appearance." "Monastorm," RWBY suggested enthusiastically. Energix. "Ooh, how about Dustwalker?" Despite the serious implications, Ben found himself smiling at RWBY's irrepressible spirit. "Let's go with Manaflow for now. Simple and descriptive. Boring but functional," Yang critiqued with a good-natured shrug. Gwen returned the crystallized cylinder to the workbench, her expression troubled. "The real question is why this is happening. The Omnitrix creating a transformation based on my evolved abilities suggests our changes aren't random adaptations. It's responding to Remnant," Ben agreed. "But whether it's returning to something it once was or evolving into something new entirely, we won't know without more information," Weiss concluded, saving her documentation and closing the monitoring programs. "Which means waiting for your grandfather's arrival with the data crystal reader." RWBY hopped off her perch on a nearby stool. "So more training until then. I want to see what other cool stuff Manaflow can do. Assuming I can access that transformation again," Ben cautioned. "The Omnitrix isn't always cooperative with new forms." Gwen gathered her notes, organization automatic after years of academic excellence. "We should continue testing in a more controlled environment. The training forest would provide space for larger energy manipulations without risking laboratory equipment. And fewer witnesses," Yang added pragmatically. As they packed up their equipment, Ben noticed Gwen's hands trembling slightly, a detail others might miss, but significant for someone with her usual self-control. When the others moved ahead toward the exit, he held back, catching her arm gently. "Hey," he said softly. "You okay?" Gwen's carefully maintained composure faltered momentarily. "I'm adjusting. These changes, they're not just affecting my powers, Ben. I can feel them reshaping who I am, how I perceive everything." Her green eyes met his, vulnerability breaking through her scholarly facade. "Sometimes I wonder if I'll still be me when the process completes." The raw honesty struck Ben deeply. Throughout their shared childhood, Gwen had always been his anchor, the rational voice, the planner. The one who remained steady when chaos erupted. Seeing her uncertain shook him more than he expected. "You're still Gwen," he assured her, squeezing her arm gently. "Still the smartest person I know. Still annoying." This earned a small smile. "Still family." Something flickered in her eyes at that last word, an emotion Ben couldn't quite identify before she reclaimed her composed expression. "Thanks, doofus," she said with familiar affection, though something in her tone had shifted subtly. "I needed that reminder." As they rejoined the others, Ben found himself unusually aware of Gwen's proximity, the subtle floral scent that had always been part of her presence, the graceful efficiency of her movements, the way sunlight caught copper highlights in her auburn hair as they exited the building. "Family," he reminded himself firmly. Whatever strange awareness had awakened between them, that fundamental truth remained constant. Yet as the Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist, seemingly in time with Gwen's steps, he wondered if Remnant was reshaping more than just their powers. Emerald forest stretched beneath them, a verdant canopy swaying in the autumn breeze as RWBY and Gwen assembled at the same cliffside launch point where initiation had taken place weeks earlier. The location offered both privacy and space for their specialized training session. "Remember," Weiss cautioned as she completed setting up monitoring equipment, The objective is controlled testing of energy interaction between the Omnitrix and Gwen's mana abilities. Not property destruction. You take the fun out of everything, Yang complained good-naturedly, adjusting her gauntlets. RWBY surveyed the forest with tactical precision. We should establish a perimeter pattern. Yan, G and I can patrol the outer edges to intercept any Grimm drawn to our activity or unexpected visitors. Good thinking, Ben agreed, impressed by her strategic foresight. Weiss, you monitor from this vantage point. Gwen and I will conduct the primary tests in the clearing below. As the team dispersed to their positions, Ben and Gwen made their way down the cliff face, Ben transformed into Spider Monkey for agility. Gwen creating mana platforms that stepped steadily downward through the air. The clearing they selected showed signs of previous Grimm encounters, scorched earth from dust explosions, claw marks on ancient trees. The remnants of combat that had likely occurred during initiation. The damaged environment made it ideal for their purposes, already battle-scarred and unlikely to draw attention if further altered. Ben reverted to human form as they reached the forest floor. So, think I can trigger that new transformation intentionally. Gwen circled the clearing, establishing a perimeter of mana sensors, small constructs that would alert them to approaching entities. The Omnitrix usually requires time to properly catalog new transformations before they become reliably accessible. True, Ben acknowledged, activating the device and cycling through available forms. But given how it's been behaving on Remnant, standard operating parameters may not apply. To his surprise, among the familiar silhouettes appeared a new one, unmistakably the energy being they'd temporarily dubbed Manaflow. The Omnitrix had already incorporated the transformation into its active roster. That was fast, he remarked. Selecting the new alien, green light enveloped him, and once again he became the swirling energy entity contained within black armor segments. The transformation fell, different from his usual experiences, less a complete replacement of his consciousness with alien instincts, more an expansion of his existing awareness into new dimensions of perception. I can see your mana network, Manaflow observed, his voice resonating with harmonic overtones. It's like a circulatory system, but for energy instead of blood. Gwen approached cautiously, her own mana respo. NDING to his presence by flowing toward him in tendrils of magenta light. What else can you perceive? Manaflow turned slowly, taking in their surroundings with senses beyond ordinary vision. The forest is saturated with ambient dust energy. Tiny particles everywhere, especially concentrated around areas where Grimm have been destroyed. He pointed to a particularly dark patch of ground. There, something died there recently, not a Grimm. It left an energy echo. Gwen directed her attention to the indicated spot, extending her perception. You're right, residual aura signature, probably an animal caught by a Grimm. Let's try something basic, Manaflow suggested. Energy projection and manipulation. See if we can coordinate efforts. Gwen nodded, generating a complex mana construct. A three-dimensional array of interconnected geometric forms. Try replicating this. Manaflow studied the pattern, then extended his hands. Energy flowed from his fingertips, attempting to mimic Gwen's creation. The result was similar in general structure but lacked the precise angles and connections of her version. Not quite right, he observed. The control is different. You're using academic precision, formulas, calculations. This form operates more on intuition. Interesting, Gwen noted, adjusting her construct. Different approaches to the same fundamental energy. Try connecting with mine rather than replicating it. Manaflow extended a tendril of energy toward Gwen's construct. The moment they touched, both patterns transformed, merging, expanding, evolving into something neither had consciously designed. The combined structure pulsed with light, symbols racing along its surface in sequences too rapid to follow. Are you controlling that? Manaflow asked, fascination overriding concern. No, Gwen whispered. It's self-organizing. Like the energy itself has memory, purpose. From her monitoring position atop the cliff, Weiss's voice came through their communicado. RS. Whatever you're doing is generating energy signatures visible on multiple spectrums. I'm recording unprecedented harmonic patterns. The construct continued expanding, forming what appeared to be a three-dimensional map. Topographical features rising and falling, locations illuminated with varying intensities. It's Remnant, Gwen realized, recognizing the continental outlines. But showing something beneath the surface. Energy paths, or ley lines, mana flow supplied, the knowledge emerging from somewhere deep within his transformed consciousness. Natural dust circulation through the planet's crust. The map zoomed in, focusing on a specific region, a desert area that Gwen recognized from her studies. That's the Vacua wasteland, she identified, where Grandpa Max's records say the first Omnitrix components were discovered. The map descended further, revealing subterranean structures that shouldn't have been visible to anyone without advanced scanning technology, vast chambers, artificial constructs. Technology integrated with natural formations. That's not on any official survey, Gwen said, academic knowledge automatically cataloging the discrepancy. Those structures would rewrite archaeological understanding of pre-kingdom civilizations. Before they could investigate further, the energy construct destabilized, collapsing into formless light that dissipated into the air. Simultaneously, the Omnitrix symbol on Manaflow's chest began flashing red, timeout imminent. Red light engulfed him, and Ben returned to human form, looking slightly disoriented. Did you see that? The underground complex. Quote, yes, Gwen confirmed, her expression troubled. And I recognized some of the architectural elements from ancient texts. They match descriptions of the legendary First Kingdom, the civilization said to have existed before modern remnant, before the Grimm. Ben rubbed his temples, processing information. So Vilgax was telling the truth, at least partially. There's something in the Vacuo Desert connected to the Omnitrix's origins. But that doesn't explain how it crossed dimensions, Gwen pointed out. Or why it's responding to Remnant now as if returning to its source. Their communicators crackled with static before Ruby's voice broke through. Heads up, team. We've got company. Grimm approaching from the north, and they're not the standard variety. Ben and Gwen exchanged glances before sprinting toward the indicated direction, Ben already activating the Omnitrix for another transformation. This time he selected Diamondhead, the Crystalli. Nave form's durability and combat effectiveness proven against modified Grimm. They reached a small ridge overlooking a narrow ravine just as Ruby and Yang engaged the first wave of creatures, Beowulfs. But unlike any they'd previously encountered, these Grimm had evolved beyond the crystal implants they'd seen earlier. Now the creatures appeared partially crystalline themselves, bone-white plates, interspersed with translucent green structures that pulsed with familiar energy. Omnitrix energy signatures, Gwen identified immediately, her academic analysis continuing even as she prepared for combat. They're further along the modification process than the ones you described from previous encounters. Diamondhead surveyed the tactical situation. Ruby and Yang were holding their own against the initial wave. But more Grimm were emerging from the forest depths, each bearing the same crystalline modifications, moving with unnatural coordination that standard Grimm lacked. Weiss, he called into his communicator. We need containment glyphs. These things are giving off energy we should analyze. En route, came the terse reply. Diamondhead leapt from the ridge, crystalline body Ae's absorbing the impact as he landed beside Yang, who was grappling with a particularly large alpha Beowulf. About time you joined the party, she grunted, delivering a shotgun-enhanced punch that shattered the creature's jaw. Wouldn't miss it, Diamondhead replied, morphing his arm into a blade that cleaved through another Grimm with diamond-sharp precision. Especially when they're carrying pieces of my technology. Ruby appeared in a burst of rose petals, crescent rose scything through multiple opponents with graceful efficiency. They're different from the ones at initiation, she reported between strikes. More coordinated, almost like they're sharing information. Gwen joined the battle from above, mana constructs materializing as platforms, shields, and projectiles. Her fighting style complemented Ben's with practiced familiarity, covering his blind spots, enhancing his attacks with precisely timed energy projections. It's like they were expecting us, she called out, Cr. Eating a shield that deflected a Grimm's pounce. This isn't random. They came directly to our testing site. Weiss arrived at the battlefield's edge, immediately assessing the tactical situation and deploying a series of containment glyphs around the perimeter, preventing Grimm from escaping or reinforcements from arriving. The modified crystals are emitting signals on multiple frequencies, she reported. Myrtanaster directing her glyphs with precision, including one that matches the Omnitrix's pulse pattern. Diamond Head shattered another Beowulf with a well-placed strike. They're tracking the Omnitrix. That's how they found us. Or they're being directed to it, Gwen suggested, her mana enveloping a Grim completely and compressing until the creature disintegrated. As the team continued their coordinated defense, the pattern of the attack became clearer. The Grim weren't trying to kill them so much as isolate Diamond Head from the others, herding him toward the ravine where shadows seemed unnaturally deep. They're using pack hunting techniques, RWBY realized, using her scythe to pole vault over 2 Beowulfs and land beside Diamond Head. Trying to separate you from the group. Then we don't let them, Yang declared, punching the ground with enough force to create a shockwave that disrupted the Grim's formation. The creatures adapted instantly, their crystalline components pulsing in synchronized patterns. 3 larger Beowulfs merged, literally fused their physical forms, creating a hybrid monstrosity with multiple heads and limbs in configurations that defied natural anatomy. That's new, Diamond Head commented dryly, reshaping both arms into blades. And disturbing. The fused Grim roared with triple voices, then charged with unexpected speed. Diamond Head braced for impact, but the creature veered at the last moment, targeting not him but Gwen, as if recognizing her mana abilities as the greater threat. Gwen, Diamond Head shouted in warning, but she had already perceived the danger. Mana coalesced around her in layered shields, each glowing with different intensity. The fused Grim collided with the outermost barrier, its momentum only par. Teally absorbed as it crashed through the first 2 layers. Diamond Head launched crystal shards with precision accuracy, targeting the creature's leg joints to immobilize it before it could breach Gwen's final defensive layer. Simultaneously, RWBY appeared above in a shower of petals, bringing crescent rows down with devastating force on the Grim's central head. The combined assault should have destroyed the creature, but instead, the crystal components throughout its body pulsed with intense green light. The fused Grim shuddered, then began to transform, bone plates shifting, limbs reconfiguring. Until it had adopted an eerily humanoid stance. It's evolving mid-battle, Weiss observed with clinical horror from her position maintaining the containment field. Adapting to counter our attacks. The transformed Grim opened what could now clearly be identified as a mouth and spoke, the sound grating and artificial, but unmistakably language, Omnitrix bearer. Surrender the device. Diamond Head faltered momentarily in shock. It can talk. Perfect. Because regular Grim weren't creepy enough. It's being controlled, Gwen surmised, maintaining her remaining shield while gathering mana for a counterattack. Like a puppet, the creature tilted its misshapen head. Anodite hybrid detected. Unexpected variable. Threat assessment. Hi, Anodite, RWBY questioned, maintaining combat stance beside Diamond Head. My grandmother's species from our dimension, Gwen explained quickly. Energy beings capable of manipulating mana. But how does it know that term? The Grim's response was immediate and chilling. All data from all dimensions accessible through the Omnitrix network. The prototype returns to its creator. The circle completes. Before they could process this cryptic statement, the creature launched a coordinated attack, not physically but energetically. The crystalline components throughout its body discharged simultaneously, creating a pulse that interfered specifically with Diamond Head's structure and Gwen's mana. Diamond Head felt his crystalline body becoming brittle, molecular bonds weakening. Beside him, Gwen cried out as her mana constructs destabilized. Energy flowing uncontrollably from her hands in wild, unfocused streams. They're disrupting your powers, Yang shouted, launching herself at the Grim with berserker fury. Her fist connected with its chest, delivering enough force to shatter ordinary Grim armor, yet the creature merely staggered back, already adapting to absorb kinetic impacts. RWBY World Crescent rose in a defensive pattern around Diamond Head and Gwen, creating a momentary safety zone. Weiss, we need a new approach. The heiress responded immediately, switching dust chambers in Mertenaster. Elemental disruption pattern, like we practiced. A complex sequence of glyphs materialized around the battlefield. Fire, ice, lightning, gravity, each activating in precise succession to create conflicting energy fields that the Grim couldn't adapt to simultaneously. The creature's crystalline components flickered erratically as they attempted to process multiple contradictory energy patterns. In that moment of confusion, Diamond Head forced his destabilizing body to cooperate, forming a massive crystal spike beneath the Grim that impaled it from below. Gwen, fighting through her own power disruption, aged to focus enough mana to create a compression field around the impaled creature, containing the energy discharge that would typically accompany a Grimm's death. Hold it together, she gritted through clenched teeth, sweat beading on her forehead from the effort. We need to capture its energy signature before it dissipates. Weiss redirected her glyphs to reinforce Gwen's containment, while RWBY and Yang dispatched the remaining standard Beowulfs that had accompanied the evolved creature. The impaled Grimm continued to struggle, its form destabilizing but the crystalline components fighting to maintain cohesion. It fixed its gaze on Diamondhead, red eyes flickering with green energy. Inevitable, it rasped. The Omnitrix returns. The transformation completes. Tennyson blood calls to Tennyson blood. The cryptic statement struck Diamondhead like a physical blow. What does that mean? What connection does my family have to the Omnitrix? Instead of answering, the creature's crystal components pulsed one final time before the containment field collapsed. Energy erupted outward in a controlled explosion that knocked the team backward but caused no lasting damage, almost as if precisely calibrated to disable without destroying. As the dust settled, nothing remained of the fused Grimm except scattered crystal fragments rapidly dissolving into shadow. The Omnitrix symbol on Diamondhead's chest flashed red, and moments later, Ben stood in the crystalline alien's place, looking shaken. Is everyone okay? He asked, surveying his teammates. RWBY picked herself up, brushing debris from her combat skirt. A little singed around the edges, but functioning. What was that about Tennyson blood? Yang asked, helping Weiss to her feet. Ben turned to Gwen, who looked EQ. You ally disturbed by the creature's final words. I don't know, but whatever connection exists between my family and the Omnitrix, it's something Vilgax is aware of, and is trying to exploit. Weiss roached one of the few crystal fragments that hadn't yet dissolved, carefully collecting it in a specimen container. We should analyze this immediately. If these modified Grimm are tracking the Omnitrix, we need to understand the mechanism. And what it meant by anodite hybrid, Gwen added, her scientific curiosity overtaking personal concerns. My grandmother's species shouldn't be known on Remnant. Yet that creature identified me immediately. Ben helped RWBY collapse Crescent Rose into its compact form. Let's head back to Beacon. I think we've conducted enough research for one day. As they gathered their equipment and began the trek back to the academy, Ben found himself walking beside Gwen, their steps naturally synchronizing as they had since childhood. You okay? He asked quietly, noting the lingering tension in her posture. Physically, yes, she replied. Mentally, processing. That creature knew things about me that no one on Remnant should know. About both of us, Ben corrected. The Tennyson connection, whatever it is. Gwen glanced at him, green eyes troubled. Ben, what if our family's history with the Omnitrix goes deeper than we know? What if Grand Max brought us to Remnant not just to investigate, but because we belong here in some way? The question resonated uncomfortably with thoughts Ben had been avoiding since Vilgax's first appearance. You think Grandpa's been keeping secrets, don't you? Gwen countered. He always has. Remember when we thought he was just a retired plumber? Or when he hid his knowledge of the Omnitrix? Selective truth is his specialty. Ben couldn't argue with that assessment. Max Tennyson's life had been a series of revealed layers, each discovery showing the depth of secrets beneath. If that's true, he said slowly, then the data crystal he sent with you probably contains only what he wants us to know, Gwen finished. Not necessarily the full truth. They walked in silence for several steps, the weight of potential family secrets heavy between them. Whatever the truth is, Ben finally said, we'll face it together. Like always. Gwen's hand brushed his briefly, perhaps accidentally, perhaps not. Like always, she agreed softly. The contact, brief as it was, sent an unexpected current through Ben, not unlike the energy connection they'd experienced during the Manaflow transformation, but more personal. More confusing. He found himself acutely aware of their proximity, of the subtle floral scent that had always been part of Gwen's presence but now seemed somehow more significant. Ahead of them, RWBY turned and walked backward, silver eyes bright with irrepressible curiosity despite the bottle's gravity. So, Gwen, Ben never really explained how you two grew up together. Were you always super-powered cousins? Or did that come later? The innocent question broke the moment's tension, allowing them to slip back into familiar patterns. Ben was an absolute disaster when he first got the Omnitrix. Gwen replied, academic composure returning with the comfortable topic. Set a forest on fire, crashed the RV, nearly destroyed a city. Hey, Ben protested. I was N years old with the most powerful device in the universe suddenly attached to my wrist. Some adjustment period was expected. RWBY laughed delightedly. Please tell me there are embarrassing stories. Volumes. Gwen assured her with a growing smile. Like the time he got stuck as Wildmud during a formal dance. As Gwen launched into the tale, embellishing Ben's mishaps with scholarly precision, he found himself strangely content despite the lingering questions and concerns. Whatever was happening between them, whatever secrets lay in their family's past, the foundation of their relata onship remained unchanged. The push and pull of teasing affection, mutual respect, and absolute trust that had defined them since childhood. Yet something had shifted, subtle but undeniable. And as Omnitrix pulsed against his wrist in time with Gwen's animated gestures, Ben wondered if Remnant was merely revealing something that had always existed beneath the surface. The energy signature is unmistakable, Weiss concluded, manipulating the holographic display above the laboratory workbench. The crystal fragment from the fused Grim rotated slowly in a containment field, its structure displayed in magnified detail. It's utilizing principles similar to the Omnitrix, but corrupted, forced to integrate with Grim biology rather than harmonizing naturally. Team RWBY and Gwen had convened in Beacon's secure research laboratory following their encounter in the Emerald Forest. Hours had passed as they analyzed the recovered fragment, comparing its properties to their existing data on the Omnitrix and dust interactions. Like a virus, Gwen suggested, studying the molecular patterns. It's rewriting the Grim's fundamental structure to create a hybrid that can channel Omnitrix-like transformative energy. RWBY peered at the display with surprising technical insight. Could that be why it merged those Beowulfs? Testing combining different Grim types like the Omnitrix combines alien DNA. A crude approximation, Ben agreed, impressed by her reasoning. But the principle seemed similar. Young, who had been unusually quiet during the analysis, finally spoke up. So, we're facing someone who understands how the Omnitrix works, is adapting its technology to control Grim, and knows things about your family that even you don't. That about sum it up. Succinctly, yes, Weiss confirmed. Great. Young cracked her knuckles with grim determination. So when do we go on the offensive instead of waiting for the next attack? Ben considered the question seriously. We need more information first. Charging into Vilgax's territory without understanding what we're facing would be suicide. Agreed, Gwen said, but Yang's right about one thing. We can't keep reacting. We need to disrupt whatever operation is creating these modified Grim. Weiss manipulated the display, highlighting the crystal's energy emission pattern. The fragment is still transmitting data, albeit weakly. With proper equipment, we might be able to trace the signal to its source. That would be incredibly dangerous, Ben cautioned. If they can track the Omnitrix, they'd detect any attempt to follow their signal back. RWBY had moved to the laboratory's window, gazing thoughtfully at the evening sky. What if we use that? Create a controlled scenario where they think they're tracking you. But we're actually setting a trap. The tactical suggestion surprised the others, reminding them that beneath RWBY's youthful enthusiasm lay the mind of a natural strategist. Baiting Vilgax is risky, Ben said slowly. But if we could control the encounter. The laboratory door slid open before he could complete the thought, revealing a slender man in an antiquated brown coat, with white streaks in his dark hair and piercing eyes that seemed to see beyond normal perception. A sound strategy, Ms. Rose, the stranger commented casually, though perhaps premature given current circumstances. Ben and Gwen straightened simultaneously, recognition immediate. Professor Paradox, Gwen greeted with cautious respect. The newcomer smiled, checking a pocket watch with practiced nonchalance. Precisely on time, as always. Though, time is such a relative concept, particularly in circumstances where dimensional boundaries have grown permeable. RWBY looked between the cousins and the stranger in confusion. Friend of yours? Something like that, Ben replied, not taking his eyes off Paradox. He's a time traveler from our dimension. His appearances usually coincide with imminent disasters. How flattering, Paradox remarked dryly. I prefer to think of myself as a temporal curator, preserving causality's most elegant pathways. He surveyed the laboratory with academic interest. Fascinating facilities. Remnant's integration of dust technology creates such unique research environments. Weiss stepped forward, curiosity overcoming caution. You know about dust, my dear Ms. Schnee. Paradox replied with gentle amusement. I know about everything eventually. The question is always which, when, I happen to be experiencing at any given moment. Yang crossed her arms skeptically. So you're saying you're from the future, and the past, and several sideways directions not properly definable in standard dimensional terms. Paradox approached the contained crystal fragment, studying it with practiced analytical precision. Though at present, I'm primarily concerned with the convergence occurring between Ben's universe and Remnant. A fascinating temporal knot that wasn't supposed to unravel quite so dramatically. Convergence? Gwen questioned sharply. What do you mean? Paradox turned his penetrating gaze to her. Surely you've noticed, Ms. Tennyson. Your mana abilities evolving, the Omnitrix developing new functions, familiar faces appearing in unexpected forms. He gestured vaguely toward the laboratory door. Mr. Levin's presence, for instance, is not coincidental. Kevin exists in this dimension too, Ben acknowledged. But why? What connection does Remnant have to our world? Instead of answering directly, Paradox produced a small device from his coat pocket, a metallic sphere inscribed with glowing symbols that rotated slowly in complex patterns. A temporal viewer, he explained, setting it on the laboratory table. More efficient than verbal exposition. Wouldn't you agree? The sphere activated without apparent input, projecting a three-dimensional scene that hovered above the table, an archaeological excavation in a desert landscape. Figures in protective gear carefully unearthing what appeared to be ancient technology partially merged with crystalline formations. 30 years ago, Paradox narrated, by Remnant's timeline. The Vacuo Desert Expedition, officially searching for pre-kingdom artifacts. Unofficially, investigating energy readings that defied conventional understanding. The projection shifted, focusing on a particular excavator, a younger version of Max Tennyson, his features instantly recognizable despite the decade's difference. Grandpa Max was here, Ben whispered in shock. 30 years ago, the first crossing, Paradox confirmed, though not yet permanent. More of a reconnaissance, you might say. The projection continued, showing Max carefully extracting a device from the sand, a primitive version of the Omnitrix, its design more crystalline than mechanical, pulsing with energy that matched the patterns they'd observed in Gwen's mana. The Proto-Omnitrix, Paradox identified. Created not by Azimuth, as you were led to believe, but by an ancient civilization on Remnant that predates the kingdoms by thousands of years. A civilization that understood the fundamental connection between all dimensions, all realities. Gwen stepped closer to the projection, scholarly interest overriding personal shock. The First Kingdom, the one mentioned in Remnant's earliest legends. Indeed, Paradox confirmed, though kingdom is a misnomer applied by later historians. They were more a collective consciousness than a political entity, beings who had evolved beyond physical form into energy states maintained by specialized crystalline vessels. Like my anodite grandmother, Gwen realized. More than coincidental similarity, Paradox agreed. The anodites of our dimension and the ancients of Remnant shared evolutionary paths, diverging only in their approach to physical form. Where anodites maintained humanoid appearances, the ancients created vessels of Eastal and technology, early dust formations, to house their consciousness. The projection shifted again, showing Max Tennyson delivering the excavated device to a familiar figure, Azimuth, the diminutive E-gray alien who had claimed to be the Omnitrix's creator. Azimuth didn't create the Omnitrix, Ben said, understanding dawning. He reverse-engineered it from Remnant technology. Refined it, Paradox corrected. Adapted its principles to function in your dimension's physical laws. The original purpose, preservation of genetic information, remained, but the methodology changed significantly. RWBY, who had been absorbing the information with surprising equanimity, asked the question that hung unspoken, but why would Mr. Tennyson bring Ben and Gwen back to Remnant if the Omnitrix came from here? Isn't that dangerous? Paradox's expression grew more serious. Perceptive, Ms. Rose. Indeed, Max's return was precipitated by concerning developments, specifically, the awakening of certain entities that should have remained dormant. The projection changed to a familiar figure, Vilgax, but not as they knew him. This version appeared more integrated with Remnant's environment, his armor, incorporating dust crystals and Grimm-like elements that seemed natural rather than grafted on. In your dimension, Vilgax was an alien warlord, Paradox explained. Here, he is something else entire. Li, one of the ancient ones who refused to abandon physical form when his civilization transcended. A being who helped create the original Omnitrix for purposes his fellows eventually rejected. What purposes? Weiss asked, scientific detachment maintaining her composure despite the extraordinary revelations. Paradox manipulated the temporal viewer, showing new images, early humans merging with what appeared to be proto-Grimm, transforming into hybrid beings with both human intelligence and Grimm resilience. To end the war between humanity and Grimm by merging them, he explained. The original Omnitrix was designed to transform humans into Grimm-human hybrids, creating a new species that would inherit Remnant. The revelation struck them all into momentary silence. That's why it responds to me, Ben finally said, looking down at the device on his wrist with new understanding. The Omnitrix Azimuth gave me was reprogrammed for alien transformations, but its core technology still are. Recognizes human and Grimm DNA as compatible, and explains why my powers are evolving here, Gwen added. The mana I manipulate is fundamentally similar to the energy the ancients used. Paradox closed the temporal viewer, the projection fading, which brings us to the critical juncture. Remnant's Vilgax has awakened after millennia of dormancy, sensing the return of Omnitrix technology to this dimension. He seeks to complete his original vision, to transform humanity into Grimm hybrids under his control. Using Ben's Omnitrix as the template, Weiss concluded, the scientific implications clicking into place. The modified Grimm we've encountered are prototypes, test subjects for the larger transformation. But what does any of this have to do with Tennyson blood? Ben pressed. That fused Grimm said our family is connected to the Omnitrix somehow. Paradox's expression turned cautious, unusual for someone typically so forthright about temporal matters. That, young Benjamin, is a revelation that must come from Max himself. Family secrets have their own temporal weight. Before anyone could press further, alarms blared throughout the academy, the distinctive pattern signaling a major Grimm incursion at the kingdom's borders. Perfect timing, Yang muttered, activating her gauntlets. Paradox checked his pocket watch with practiced casualness. And that would be my cue to depart. Temporal observation has its limits. Direct intervention in pivotal moments creates unpleasant causality knots. You're leaving? RWBY asked incredulously. After dropping all that information on us. Information is merely context, Ms. Rose, Paradox replied with enigmatic serenity. What matters is the choices you make with it. He turned to Ben and Gwen specifically. The connection between your families and the Omnitrix runs deeper than you can currently comprehend. Trust in that connection, even when it leads to uncomfortable truths. With that cryptic advice, he manipulated his watch, creating a swirling vortex of temporal energy. We'll meet again at the convergence point. Until then, remember that not all transformations are visible to the eye. He stepped into the vortex and vanished, leaving Team RWBY and Gwen staring at empty space as the alarm continued its urgent summons. Well, that was cryptic and unhelpful, Yang commented, breaking the stunned silence. Actually, Ben countered, activating the Omnitrix with renewed purpose, it was exactly what we needed. If Vilgax's goal is to use the Omnitrix to transform humanity, then every attack, every modified Grimm, has been leading to this moment, a large-scale test of his transformation technology. RWBY was already retrieving Crescent Rose from its storage position. So we stop him. That's what Huntresses do. And alien superheroes, Yang added with a grin. As they prepared to respond to the alarm, Gwen caught Ben's arm. What Paradox said about our family connection to the Omnitrix? I know, Ben acknowledged. More secrets. But right now, we have a more immediate problem. Gwen nodded, mana already gathering around her hands in preparation for battle. Side by side, always, Ben confirmed. selecting a transformation as they moved toward the door. Whatever family secrets awaited revelation, whatever connection existed between the Tennysons and the ancient technology now bonded to his wrist. Ben knew one truth with absolute certainty: he would face it with Gwen beside him, as they had faced every challenge since childhood. And as the Omnitrix pulsed against his skin in time with Gwen's mana, he wondered if perhaps the device had always known what Paradox had only hinted at, that Tennyson blood and the Omnitrix were meant to be united across dimensions, across time itself. Chapter 3 End. The End. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.